Learn how to build and deploy a full-stack Notion clone using NextJS 13, DALL-E, and Vercel. You'll style the app using Shadcn and Tailwind CSS. You'll also learn how to interact with databases with the efficiency of ORMs. Elliot Chong created this course. He specializes in creating comprehensive tutorials on how to build AI-powered applications.
Hi, what's poppin'? I'm Elliot, a web developer from Singapore, and today here I have a build for you that is a Notion plus AI clone. So basically what it does is a AI note-taking assistant. So it's kind of like Notion where you have a built-in editor where you can type your text and there will be an AI integration with it. So let's just show you what I mean. So here we can see that it's deployed to Vercel, right, using Next.js, and you can press get started and basically we'll be using Clerk authentication for this app. So you can either sign in with Google or GitHub and we'll press authorize. So I'm going to show you how to build this entire thing and deploy it from scratch. So you can see we land in this beautiful dashboard, right, where we're able to see all our notebooks. And all these images today we'll be learning how to use the OpenAI DALL-E API. So if you're not sure, DALL-E is an image generation, is a text-to-image model developed by OpenAI. So I'll be teaching you how to use their API to actually generate these images that's relevant to the links. Okay, so let me just show you an example of how it looks like. So we can create a new notebook. So you can name it anything you want, like let's say cats. Alright, so basically what this does, it will hit the Vercel API, and this API will be running on the edge. So I'll explain what the edge is, but basically this edge runtime will allow you to run AI functions for much longer, and it's much faster also. So the reason why it's taking a little while is because it's trying to generate the image, so that takes about a few seconds. But after you've generated, it brings you to this really nice what you see is what you get editor, where you can start typing your notes like hello, and you can even like have functions like italicize it or strike through it, or you can make it into a code block. Right, here's another code block where you can type in like JavaScript functions or anything, right, just to take notes. Okay, but what's really cool about this and what I'm really happy to show you today is you can have AI autocomplete. So here I can write like cats are, right, and let's say I'm trying to think of something, I can press Shift A, right, and it's gonna have an AI generated. You can see that AI is gonna be basically trying to complete my sentence. So here it generates that cats are mysterious creatures with eyes that seem hold a world of secrets. Right, we can basically it's a very nice AI functionality, and we're using the Vercel AI SDK, right, to actually make this streaming feature. So you can see that as we type, like let's say we can say that what else, cats and dogs are, and let's try the autocomplete, are not just pets but also guardians of secrets, right? So it's a very nice cool feature that you can help in your writing assistant. Yeah, so we'll be building everything from scratch, deploying it. I'll teach you how to make all this what you see is what you get editor. You can have like lists and stuff, so you can really make this into like your daily editor where you can just type notes and have AI to assist you. And you can see there's an auto save feature, so all of these notes are saved to the database. So you can see that even if we refresh, right, the data is being persisted, and we'll be using a database called NeonDB, which is a serverless Postgres database. Yeah, so if you come back here, right, if you come back to the dashboard, right, and we refresh the page, we can see that the cats has been generated. So there's an image that's using DALL-E API to generate a notebook profile thumbnail image to fit whatever name that we have given it. So all of this will be using prompt engineering. Yeah, so it's quite a simple short build, but I just want to go through how we can build this out today. Alright, so after looking at the demo, I'm just going to go through a little of what we'll be learning today, an overview. So we'll be using NextJS 13 with the app directory for this app. We'll be using Shadcn, which is a Tailwind CSS library that is very accessible and comes with a lot of nice user interfaces components out of the box for us to use. And we'll be obviously using OpenAI for the DALL-E text image generation and also the autocomplete note feature. And number 4, we'll be learning about the Vercel Edge runtime. So because normally Vercel free tier allows your APIs to actually run for only 5 seconds, right? But then the API, like the OpenAI AI image generations, will take about 8 to 10 seconds. So if we use a normal Vercel runtime without the Edge runtime, it's going to basically time out, and then it won't allow your function to run. It won't allow the AI to generate the image before expiring the API. Therefore, if you run it the Vercel on this special Edge runtime, it allows us to run the function for much longer and make it much faster. Okay, for our ORM, we'll be using DrizzleORM. So this is a new ORM that is in competition with Prisma, right? It's a TypeScript object relational mapper that allows interacting with your SQL databases much easier and give you type safety. And we'll be using Neon database, as I said just now. And for number 7, we'll be using Firebase storage to save all the files, right? So you can see that here, all these images that's generated, it'll be stored in our Firebase app. So then we can access the URL through there. Then we'll be using this for the node editor. We'll be using this library called TipTap, TipTap node editor, right? Which is another library to basically help you make this kind of very full-fledged, what you see is what you get editor. And lastly, the Vercel AI SDK will help us tie the front end to the AI backend. Alright, so let us get started. So here I'm gonna open up my terminal and let us do to create the NextJS project. Let's do npx create -next app at latest with the TypeScript flag. So press that, it's gonna ask us for the project name, right? It's gonna ask us to install the latest version first, and then it's gonna ask us for the project name. In this case, I'm gonna do ideation -YouTube. So it's just a nice pun like AI ideation -YouTube. So let's just press enter. We'll be using ESLint, Tailwind CSS. We'll be using the source directory and the app router. So this is new within NextJS 13. And also we'll be just leave everything on default. And then when it's done, I'm gonna come back to you. Okay, so now that the NextJS project has finished initializing, I'm gonna do cd ideation -YouTube. And let us do code dot to open up this folder in our VS Code editor. Okay, excellent. I'm gonna close down this terminal first. Let's expand the code. And what I'm going to do here now first is I'm going to run npm run dev, right, to make sure that the NextJS project is up and running. So I'm going to come back to my browser here. I'm going to open up localhost 3000. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to open this up to the right and then the code on the left so that we can see what's happening. Alright, so here we have the NextJS project 13 running, and that's good. That means everything is working. Alright, so let me just walk you through about how the project structure is going to look like. So here you can see that it's running on NextJS 13.5.2, right? And so there's this new app directory. So you see, if you go into the source folder, you can see there's this new app directory. So how the layout, how the navigation is done in NextJS 13.4 is through this special page.tsx. So this page.tsx is a special file name, right? And is basically doing file-based routing. So any folder inside this app directory that contains this page.tsx will be mapped to the file to the route name. So because this page.tsx lives in the root of this app, we can see that it maps to this root URL. So this basically this file here in this page.tsx map to whatever is shown here in this page. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna just return a normal h1 that have a class name of text red 600, right, and say hello world. So I'm gonna test out Tailwind CSS. So because NextJS 13 already comes with Tailwind CSS when we initialize it, and we can see that it works. So we know that Tailwind CSS is working. Okay, so now that we have set up Tailwind CSS and NextJS, let's now install Shadcn. So if you're unfamiliar with Shadcn, Shadcn is this very beautiful component library with beautifully designed components that we can copy and paste into our apps, and is fully accessible and customizable, and this is all built on Radix UI and Tailwind CSS. So you can see it really gives us very nice, beautiful user interfaces, right, which we can just use directly into our app. So to set up Shadcn, right, come back down to your terminal, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna run this command npx Shadcn-ui at latest init, so to initialize the Shadcn application, right? Then it's gonna ask us if you're using TypeScript, we'll press yes. Then it's asks us which style, we're gonna leave it as default and leave the base color as default. It's gonna ask us where our global.css is. So right now we can see that there's this source/app/globals.css, right? This comes with the the default NextJS project. What I want to do is delete this globals.css. I'm gonna override it in this in the Shadcn file. So because we want Shadcn to handle all our styling for us, so we're gonna tell the globals.css lives in source/app/globals.css. Okay, enter, and it's gonna ask us if we want to use CSS variables. Press yes, and it asks us where our Tailwind config is. So in this case, we are using TypeScript, so the Tailwind config actually lives in tailwind.config.ts, as we can see here. So let's enter that. So it's tailwind.config.ts. Then we're gonna leave the import alias as default and the import alias for utilities as default. And lastly, we're using React Server components. Press yes. It's going to ask us if you want to write the configuration to components.json. So it's just writing the configurations to a file to be saved by Shadcn. Okay, perfect. So now we can see that there's this new components.json file here, and basically it contains all the configuration that we've just entered in the terminal. Alright, so how do we actually start using Shadcn? So imagine I want to use like a button component, right? So for now, I'm just gonna restart the server, right? And then let's see what's happening. So let's come back to page.tsx. Alright. So right now it's white color, so everything's been resetted. But let's say I want to install the Shadcn button. So whenever you want to use a new component within Shadcn, you have to manually install it. And this is a good thing because you only install the components you need, and the components you do not need will not be built into your app as a final production. Okay, so you want to install a new button, you do npx shadcn-ui at latest add button. So you can add the button component. It's gonna ask you if you want to confirm. So just install the button. It's automatically gonna install it. And let's see where it installs it in. So we can see that under source app, we can now see there's a new components folder. If you go into components, right, we can see that this is there's this UI folder, and within the UI folder is this button.tsx. So this button.tsx is basically what is generated by Shadcn, right? It uses this library called class variance authority to basically give us the styling for using Tailwind CSS to give us the styling for different variants of the pre-start button. So you never really need to go into this file to touch the buttons, right? All you need to do is know that this file exists and you can use it. So I'm going to close this out. And how do you actually use it? So instead of returning a h1, I'm going to just return a button, and we can see that this is automatically imported from UI/button. So let me just press enter, auto import, and I'm going to say click me. So let me save that, and now we can see that the button is showing up. So we have successfully installed Shadcn. Alright, so now that we have set up Shadcn, let's now go on to the next step of installing our Clerk. So Clerk, we'll be using clerk.com for the authentication part, right? Clerk is it's a beautiful framework, it's a beautiful library that makes authentication so easy and simple. So I'm going to teach you how to use it. So come down to clerk.com and you have to log into the account or sign up. And after that, you can come down to your dashboard. So in the dashboard, you're able to see all the different apps that you have made, right? So in this case, I'm going to add a new application, and I'm going to zoom in here, and we're going to basically name it AI ideation, right? YouTube, okay? And then it's asking us how will users sign in. So you can choose email as default, but I'm going to turn it off because I only want to let them sign in using Google and also GitHub. So YouTube, Google and GitHub for now, and you can choose and toggle on whatever methods you want them to sign in. So then after you have chosen, just press create application, and it will create the secret keys for you to use in your application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to press continue in docs because we're using NextJS 13, right? So continue in docs. So let's follow their instructions on how to actually use this library. So the first step is to install clerk/nextjs. So I'm going to install that. I'm going to follow their instructions. So come down to my terminal. I'm going to do npm install at clerk/nextjs. Okay. So now that we've installed it, let us actually put out environmental keys. So come down to your file directory. In the root file folder, right, on the root folder, create a new .env file. And one more thing to note is, come down to your .gitignore, and I want you to add the .env extension to the gitignore. So that the environmental file does not get committed into your Git repository and does not get pushed up to GitHub later on, right? So because you don't want people to see your secret keys because they can easily abuse it. Therefore, we're adding this .env into the gitignore. Okay, so let us now continue pasting in these two keys into the .env. So we'll paste it in and save it. So now we have this next public clerk publishable key and the secret key. Now let's go on to the third step, which is to mount the clerk provider. Right? So we need this clerk provider to wrap our entire application to give the entire application the context of who's the currently logged in user and whether they are even logged in. So come down to layout.tsx, right? So this layout.tsx is basically what wraps the entire application. And what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to just import from at clerk/nextjs. So this is a library we just in npm installed just now. And I want to import this clerk provider, right? Then I'm going to come down to this return. I'm going to just wrap the entire application in the clerk provider. Just wrap it here and save it. Alright, so that's good. And now, since we're in layout, let me just talk about this metadata. So this metadata is just what dictates what is shown on this. You can see that there's this, the tab is create next app, right? So this is what corresponds to the title tab, the tab title. So you can just change it to, let's say, ideation, YouTube. Then we can just delete the description. So if we save it now, we can see the tab name has changed to match the ideation YouTube here. Okay, that's good. So now let's continue following on the Clerk documentation. There's a few more things that we need to do. Okay, so number 4 is protect our application. So now we need this protect our application. We need to create a new middleware.ts. So this middleware.ts is a special file within Next.js that basically allows code to run before every request. So before you navigate to any page or you try to hit any endpoint, right, it will run this middleware.ts code snippet first, right? So we can use this middleware.ts to basically control whether this user is logged in, and if they're logged in, we want to protect certain pages. So what I'm going to come down to do is come down to your source folder. Inside the source folder, create a middleware.ts file, right? And I'm going to just copy in the code from the Clerk documentation in here. So basically what it does is import this auth middleware from the library and then export a default function here. So this basically protects all the routes, right? It protects all the routes so that anyone who's are not logged in, they cannot access any routes and they are forced to sign in, right? So we actually do not want that to happen because we want to basically allow these public routes. We want to allow a non-login user to access this slash route. So this slash route is like the home page. So if you can see in the deployed application, right, we can see that this is a slash route, the home page, right, where we want everyone can access. Therefore, we're gonna basically add this slash to the public routes array. Okay, so now that we have set up middleware.ts, let us move on. So, okay, so for this sign up pages, I'm gonna come down to my source directory, come down to app, and create a new folder called sign-up. Then within the sign-up, let's create two angle brackets, sign-up. Right, then within this folder, we can finally create a page.tsx. Okay, so for this page.tsx, I'm going to import this default sign-up component. So they already pre-styled a UI for us, so I'm going to save it. Okay, so we have copied in the default sign-up component, and now let's do the sign-in page. So come down to your app folder again and create a sign-in folder. Within that, do bracket sign-in. Right, then under that we can just this should be a folder, not a file. So let's do that. So it'll be a folder called bracket sign-in. Right, then inside here we can do a page.tsx, and let's create copy in the default sign-in component from clerk/nextjs. Okay, then now we need to update our environmental variables. Right, let me just zoom in here a little. Right. So we need these environmental variables to basically tell Clerk which is our sign in and sign up pages. So come down to your env file again, and now under the Clerk secret key, let us copy these 4 variables in, right? So these 4 variables basically tell Clerk which is your sign in and sign up URL. So we have mapped the sign in URL to /sign in and sign up, right? Following the folder structure here, so we'll leave that as default. But here we can also configure what happens after we sign in and what happens after we sign out. So after we have signed in, let's redirect them to the /dashboard page. And after they have signed up, we also let us lead them to the /dashboard page. So let's save that. And now, if you come back to our localhost 3000, right? So localhost 3000, right? Here's our default page. But now if you go to /sign-up, right? We can see that it brings us to this custom component here. So this maps to the sign up page here that we have this sign up component here. Okay, so that's good. So one more thing here, I'm just gonna try to center this component in the middle of the screen. So, right, so I'm gonna just return a div that just have a class name of position absolute, top of half, left of half, negative translate x of half, and negative translate y of half. And then let me just return this component. So if we do that now, we can see that if we remove that semicolon, right, we can see that the component is centered in the screen, right? And then we can also sign up and just continue with GitHub. So I'm going to do the same with the sign in component. So I'm going to copy this, come back down to my sign in component, right? And then let me just do the same, return this. Okay, but this time it will be the sign in component. So let's save this. And now we can see that if you come down to sign in page, it's also properly centered in the screen. So I'm going to come and sign up, and basically I'm going to come down to continue with my GitHub or Google account. Okay, so then it's going to just redirect me to the GitHub OAuth page. And now we can see that after we have signed in, it brought us to /dashboard, exactly what we asked Clerk to do. Okay, so now that it has redirected us to the dashboard, let us actually not do that first. I want to actually finish up my landing page, right? So you can see in the deploy application, there's this very nice big title with this typewriter effect. So I'm gonna build out this page first for us. Okay, so I'm gonna just close down all my tabs here. Come down to our page.tsx. So this is where we rendered this button. So I'm gonna basically make that into the landing page. So the first thing here is what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just delete this, and we want to return a div. Right, sorry, this will be a div. So this div, let us give it a class name of bg gradient from to right, right? So it goes to the right, and let us give it a mean height of screen from rows 100 to teal 100, right? So this is from like this dash, right? So if you save it right now, you can see there's this nice gradient from this rose color to this teal color. Okay, and one more thing I want to add here is you can see there's this very grainy, very slight grainy effect that I really love, right? So I'm gonna show you how to actually add this grainy effect. So if you come down to your global.css, right? Underneath, close down this layer base, right? So these are all basically Shadcn and Tailwind CSS configuration, right? So what we want to do is come down to this, create a new class called grainy. It's a custom class, and we'll have a background image of this this URL. So let me just copy it from down here, right? So don't worry, I'll give you the link. I'll give you a paste bin to this background image. But basically this background image is just a grain effect, right? So this background image, if you inspect it, it's gonna be grainy effect. So we can just use this grainy and in our app. So let me just save this. Come down to our page here, right? So right now we can see that it's not grainy, right? So if you add one more class here that says grainy, and let's save it. Now you can see there's this new grainy effect on our app. Yeah, so that's a very simple and nice touch to make the UI a lot nicer. Okay, so within this div, let us have another div that wraps to make everything centered. So let me have a div here, and the class name will be position absolute, top of half, left of half, negative translate x of half, and negative translate y of half. Right, then this will center everything here, and within it, let me just put a h1 that has a class name of let's give it font semi-bold text 7XL to make it huge, and let's center it by doing text center. Within the h1, let's just do AI note taking assistant. Right, then if you see that, now you can see there's this AI note taking assistant in the middle of the screen. So let me just put this green color in the note-taking, right? So make this note-taking green color. To do that, I'm going to wrap this note-taking in a span, right? So I'm going to just take this note-taking here and put it in the span, okay? And within this span, let us give it a class name of text green 600 and font bold. Font bold. Okay, so now we can see there's AI note-taking assistant. Much nicer now. Okay, right, we can see that this looks nicer. And let me just give you some space. So in front of this assistant, let us put this space block here so that it shows up nicely. Okay, so underneath this h1, let's have a spacer. So just do empty4, sorry, .empty-4. So this is just a empty div element with a margin top of 4. So then we can put our typewriter title here. So for this typewriter title, let me just put a h2 here and give a class name of font semi-bold, text 3XL, text off center, and text dash slate off 700. And here let's just put AI forward. Save it. So right now we can see that it's just a normal text, right? But we want this like a nice typewriter effect. So let's create a separate component for the typewriter effect. Come down to your directory, come down to your components, right? So we can see the components has a UI folder, but we don't want to create it within the UI folder because whatever's in the UI folder is handled by Shadcn. We want to create our thing within the components folder itself. So inside components, let us create a new file. Let's just call it typewriter title.tsx. Okay, then for this typewriter title, let's actually do tsrefc. So this tsrefc is a extension snippet in VS Code that gives me the TypeScript React arrow function export component, right? So it's under this extension called, I think, ES7 snippets or something. Yeah, snippet, yeah, simple extension snippets, right? You can install that for yourself. So it will give me this command, right? And then within here, let's actually make the typewriter effect, and we have a library for that, right? Like everything in JavaScript, there's always a library for whatever things you want. So let's install the library for the typewriting effect. So do npm install typewriter-effect. Okay, so once we have installed that, let's actually import it to use it. So import typewriter from typewriter effect. Okay, so then within here, I'm going to just return the typewriter. Okay, let's pass in the some options, right? So we want it to loop, indefinitely, forever. And then here we can actually basically tell it what kind of things to type out. So on init, we can just destructure out this typewriter. We can actually we can just take the typewriter, right? And what do you want to do with this typewriter, right? So we have a lot of different things. We can just do typewriter dot type string. So the first string we want to type is basically we can just choose a emoji and a tag line. So in this case, I'm just gonna just copy this tag line in, right? So you can write whatever you want, right? I'm just gonna put this here. So the first thing is it's gonna type out this supercharged productivity. Right, so I'm gonna save it first, and then come down back to our page.tsx, and I'm gonna import the typewriter title component here. So if we save it right now, we can see that, okay, must be either now. So one more thing we need to do here is come back to your typewriter title. We need to make this into a client component. So because this is NextJS 13, every component is by default server component, right? So now we can see that if you refresh, it should type it out, right? But we haven't started it, so to actually start typing, we have to do .start. So if we save it now, we can see that you should start typing. Let us refresh the page, and let's see what it does. And now we can see that it starts typing. And then because we put loop as true, it's gonna basically loop back, delete all the words and just loop back, right? So let's actually add more stuff. Let's say we can do, so after it has typed, let us just pause for maybe pause for 1000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. So after pausing, let us delete all, and then we can do the next type. So type string again. So then we can type out another thing, like let's say I'll copy this in, type out AI powered insight. Okay, so let's save it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So you can add however more like imperative typing you want. So we can type, then pause and delete, then type. Then basically you just have this very cool typewriter effect where you're just typing out the different tag lines you have for your application. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. It's quite simple for the home page. So let me see if there's anything else that we need for the home page. Okay, so now let's actually add the button to go to the dashboard. So underneath the H2, let's have another spacer called empty-8. So it's another empty div with the margin top of 8, right, to give you some margin here. And let us have a div here that has a, let me see, let us just remove that div actually. So below the spacer, right, so I messed it up here. So let us actually have the link. So this link comes from next-link, right? We want to basically link it to the /dashboard. And inside the link, let's show a button. So this button will have a class name of bg-green-600. Then within it, let us just do get started, right? And then let's save it. And so now we can see there's a new button here. Okay, so let's center this in the middle of the screen, right? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna just wrap this in another div, and this div will have a class name of flex and justify center. So this will just center the button in the middle of the screen. And let me just add the icon, right? You can see there's an icon, nice icon here. So for the icons we'll be using this package called Lucid React, npm install lucid-react. So it's an icon library if you have not seen before. Lucid, if you go to lucid.dev, it just provides us with very nice UI icons for us to use within our application. Okay, so inside this button, like just beside this get started, let us have a icon called arrow right. So let's import this arrow right icon from Lucid React. So import from Lucid-React. So what? Try import the arrow right icon. Okay, so this arrow right, let's give you some styling of margin left of 2, width of 5, and height of 5. and we'll give it a stroke width of let's say 3. So now it looks much nicer here with the button. So if you click on this, you can see that it will lead us to the dashboard, right, which we have not created yet. So that's good. We have created the landing page. So that's good. Alright, so now that we have completed the home page, let's actually work on the dashboard page. So come down to your directory, come down to your folder here, and come down to your app, and let's actually create a new folder called dashboard. And within the dashboard, let's create the special page.tsx. So then this will map to whatever is shown here. So let's do tsraafce to create the React component, and let's just name it to dashboard page. So if you save it, now we can see the dashboard page showing up here. Okay, so let's actually build out the user interface for the dashboard. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to return a React fragment, and within here, let us have a div that have a class name of grainy. So we have the grainy background again just now, and a minimum height of screen. And if you save it right now, we can see the grainy background showing up here. Alright. Within this div, let's actually have another div. Div that have a class name of a max width of 7XL and margin X of auto, and also padding of 10. Within this second inner div, let's have a basically an empty div with a height of 14. So here's just another spacer of empty div with a space of height of 14, just to space out the elements a little, right? And then let's have another div in here, and this div is gonna be showing the. Let me go to the deploy app. It's gonna show us my notes, the back button, and our user profile here. Okay, so for this div, let's give it a class name of flex, justify between items dash center, right? Then when we're on the medium screen, we want it to be flex dash row, but on the small screen, like on mobile, we want it to be flex column. So we can see there's this responsive element to it, so we can see that it's responsive like this. Okay, so come back down to your localhost. Let me just move this here. Okay. So within this flex container, let us have another div that have just with a class name of flex and items dash center. And within this item center div, let us have a link. Right, this link come from next/link, not lucid-react. Right, comes from next/link. Let's have a href to the slash. So this is the back button. So let's import the button and let's just do back. So let's save it, and now we have this back button showing up here. Okay, let's give it some styling. I'm gonna just have a within this button, let's have a arrow left icon from lucid-react. Right, it has a class name of margin right of 1, width of 4, and height of 4. So now we can see that it just adds an arrow to the button. And then for the button, let us give a class name of bg green of 600. Alright, to match the theme of our application. Okay, then below this link, let us have another div. Right, this has a div of, is an empty div of width dash 4, so it's just another spacer element. Right, and then here we have a h1 that says my notes. So let's just give this h1 some class names of text-3xl, fonts bold, and text-gray-900. So if we save it, now we have this, it just puts it side by side. Underneath the h1, let's have another spacer div of width-4, so it's another empty div. And let's put a user button. So this user button we can see is imported from clerk/nextjs. So this is a pre-built button component for us, right? That allows us to see our profile image and manage accounts and even log us out if you want to here. Okay, so that's pretty much it for, like, you see this top bar here, right? So you can see this on here, the button is a little smaller, so we can do that here by coming into the button, and let's pass a sizing of SM here. So we'll just make the button a little smaller. Okay, that's good. So now that we have that, let's actually build the spacer and the notebook list. Alright, so underneath the user button, we have this div, right? And then we come down to this div again, right? So basically above the two closing div, we'll have another spacer, height-8 spacer, and then here we'll have a separator. So this separator comes from Shadcn, so let's add that component. So npx Shadcn add UI add latest add separator. So you just add the component into our project, and we can import it in here. So let's just do After it has finished installing, let us do separator, and now we can see that it imports from UI/separator. And then we'll just have another spacer of -8. So right now we can see that there's this very faint line. I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but there's a faint line of the separator. And then underneath the separator here is where we will list all the nodes and the images, of course. So it's all this list. Alright, so here is, I'm just gonna just show here. So I'm gonna show a div with a class name of text-center, and inside here, inside the div, let's have a h2 that says you have no nodes yet. So this h2 will have a class name of text-xl text gray of 500. So if we don't have any nodes yet, we'll show this. So later on, this will have to be conditionally rendered. Conditionally rendered. Did I spell that right? Conditionally. Okay, whatever. Yeah. So later we'll get the nodes and we'll just conditionally render this. Okay. So we have set up the simple dashboard, and now I'm going to try to move on to help setting up the database so that we can actually start creating nodes and fetching the nodes. Right, so for the database, we'll be using a Neon DB, and we'll be also using Drizzle to interact with this Neon database. So come down to neon.tech, right? This is a domain, and you might need to sign up or log in if you have not done so. So you have to sign up into the database. So by default, it gives us a free database to work with, right? So you can then create a new project for like a free database. So for the name, let me just do ideation-YouTube. Then just choose the default Postgres version and choose a region that's closest to you. In this case, I'm closest to Singapore, so I'm going to put Singapore, and then just leave the rest as default and just create a project. So then this will give us a database connection string, right? Then we can copy this in. So let me just copy in this URL, right? Then we can actually close down the console. Actually, we don't need that anymore. So come down to your .env file, right? And we need the database URL. So let me just do database_URL and just paste this in, right? So make sure there's no white space, right? And one more thing you need to add here is at the end, right? At the end of this string, right? I want to help add this question mark, SSL mode equals to require. So we need this SSL mode equals to require because we're going to be connecting to our DrizzleORM, and we need it to be secure. So we add this here. So make sure you have that added in. Then now we can actually start making the DrizzleORM to actually interact with this database. So DrizzleORM, so if you're not sure, this is just an object relational mapper which allows us to interact with our SQL databases through very nice TypeScript objects. Okay, so what we're going to do is first come down and let's just actually close this tab. I'll walk you through how to actually install Drizzle. So come down here and just do npm install drizzle-orm, right? Drizzle-orm. Come down to your folder, okay, and we'll create a new under lib, right? So lib is for library. So basically any files that is like any utility files or any folders that we need to prepare to use beforehand, we'll put in the lib. So create a new folder under called db. So it's where we're going to store our database. So inside here we'll have two files. One is called index.ts and one is called schema.ts. So this index.ts is going to contain the Drizzle configuration to initialize our Drizzle object, and the schema.ts is where we define our database schema, like all the tables and the columns. So come down to your index.ts for the table and db, and let us actually do it. Start configuration. So one more thing you need to install is npm install @neon database/serverless, right? So sorry, ignore the rest. We just need this @neon database/serverless because basically this is a it's to help us connect the Neon database to our DrizzleORM. So after installing that, let's import a few things. So the first thing we'll import from the @neon database serverless is we import the Neon object itself and also the Neon config. Okay, and the other thing is we need to import Drizzle, right? The actual Drizzle. So we import from DrizzleORM, DrizzleORM/neon-http. Okay. So let's import the Drizzle object here. So then now we can do neon config fetch connection cache equals to true. So basically we just want to cache all the connections so that it doesn't repeat creating new connection every time we reload the page. Okay. So then we're gonna check if not process.env.database URL. Right, we're gonna then throw throw a new error saying that database URL is not defined. So we need this env variable that we have defined in here. So if there isn't this variable, it's gonna throw an error. Alright. So then lastly, we can just do const SQL equals to neon, invoke the neon function, and we can invoke it on the process.env.database URL. Okay. Then lastly, we can just export a DB object, which is the drizzle, right? Then we just pass in the SQL object into the drizzle function here. So this DB is how we interact with the thing. So we can do things like db.select.from where, something like that. So this is how we build the SQL connection strings to get back results from our database. So now that we have this, let's actually define the schema. So what kind of tables will we really need? Right? It's a really simple project. We only need, in this schema.ts, we only need to define one table. Okay, so before that, let's actually import some utility functions to help us define the table. So we'll be importing from DrizzleORM /pg-core. So pg is for Postgres core, and we import a few things like pg table. So we need this pg table to define our table. So let me just do export const $nodes, okay, equals to pg table, and then basically giving it a name of nodes. So this nodes name is gonna be what is saved within the Postgres database. This is the table name, right? And then we'll pass in the configuration object. So this is where we actually pass in all the columns. So first we have an ID column. It's gonna be a serial, right? So we want this serial, we can import it from pg core, right? You can see it's auto imported. So with serial, and basically inside the name, right? This is basically the name, the column name within the database, right? It's gonna make it the primary key. So then we also have a name field, which is a text field, also from pg-core, pg core, and we'll give it a internal table name of name. I'll make sure that this is not null. Lastly, we have a created, not lastly, but one more thing is created at. So we have a timestamp, right? It will be timestamp. So import this from pg core also. Let's just name it to the same thing, created at dot not null. So make sure it's not null, and by default we want to basically default it to null. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So whenever new row gets created, this created at field will default to this to the current timestamp. Then lastly, so image URL. So this is where we store the DALL image, right? The Firebase image. So this will be a text that just maps to image URL. Yeah. And then for this, we have a user ID, because we want to know which user created the node, right? So this is a one-to-many relationship. So let's do text is a user ID, and make sure that it's not null. So this user ID will come from the clerk user ID. And then lastly, we have the editor state, which is just a text of editor state. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So this editor state is basically what I stored, like whenever we create a new node, right? We save the state of the whatever state of the content here of what we have written. Yeah, so like let's say we come into our cats, right? So everything here is saved into the database, into this table called editor state. Yep. So now that we have defined this schema, right? Let's actually just last line. Let's just export a type called node type. So we might need the TypeScript type for this PG table, right? So we can just do it by doing type of $nodes. So these $nodes come from this PG table, and we'll just do infer select. So if we do that, if you hover over this node type, now we can see the TypeScript type. So we can inspect the name, user ID, and all the IDs. So this is very useful later on when we are actually doing the UI and the TypeScript definitions. So let's save that. So now that we have defined this schema, how do we actually make sure that the schema is synced with the database in the NeonDB cloud? So for that, there's one more tool called npm install drizzle-kit. So let me just tell you the difference. What's the difference between DrizzleORM and drizzle-kit? So DrizzleORM is what we use to interact with the database, right? Basically, like within our app, we can programmatically use the DrizzleORM to interact and fetch data. But DrizzleKit is not necessary. It's a developer tool to basically help you migrate your changes. Let's say you added a new table or you added a new column. You want to make sure that the column is synced up with the Neon database. Then you can use DrizzleKit to actually inspect, to push your migrations up to the database. And also it gives you a studio, like a web studio, to view all your database and all your rows. Okay, so now that we have installed DrizzleKit, let's actually create a configuration object to actually make sure that we know where this configuration file lives in. So come down to your file directory again. Okay, and we have to create in the root file, like in the root folder, everything outside of the source, create a new file called drizzle.config.ts. So it has to be drizzle.config.ts, and this is where we actually specify the schema, like a configuration for the Drizzle kit. Okay, so let me just make sure I got everything right. So the first thing here is let's import the type of config from the drizzle-kit. So this config object will tell us like what kind of configuration is needed. And now let's actually do export default, right? And this object is going to satisfy the config object. So now we can get some very nice like type annotation, right? Like here we can do control space and we can see all the different things we need for this configuration object. So for the driver, right, we can see we'll be using Postgres, and then for the schema, right, this schema is basically telling where does the schema file live in. So right now we can see that it lives in relative to this file, it lives in source slash lib/db slash schema.ts. So let us do that. So we'll do /source / lib / db / schema.ts. Okay, and then lastly for the db credentials, we'll pass in the connection string to be the process.env.database URL, right? And make sure that this exists. So one issue you're gonna face is that this is not gonna exist, right? Why? Because NextJS 13, right, it automatically loads in your env, but it only loads the env file for any file that's accessing it within the source directory. So any folder that's trying to access the env outside of the source directory, NextJS does not handle that. So this drizzle.config.ts will not have access to this database URL. So what we can do that is actually we must install another package called .env. We can use this .env to help us read in the env file we have. So let's just import star as .env from .env. And then we can call the .env.config object and we can pass in the path equals to .env. So it's just basically telling this file where the .env file lives in, so that it's able to load in this database URL for this variable to make sense. Okay, so now that we have that, last thing we need to do is come down to your tsconfig.json, and we have to change the target to ES6. So it's just some weird issue within Drizzle, but you just have to change it to ES6 for this to work. So now that you have done that, everything is going to work perfectly. So now you can come back to your terminal and push your schema up to the database. So to do that, we do npx drizzle-kit push pg. So :pg. So if you enter this, it's going to read in the schema, right? So it's going to see that it's going to read in the configuration file, this drizzle.config.ts. It's going to apply the changes in our Neon database. So right now we can see that it has pushed the schema up to the database. And to make sure that it has actually pushed it up, we can do npx drizzle-kit studio. Right, so if you run this, there's going to be one error. It's going to say that actually we need to install one more module, which is the pg package, right? So to actually interact with the database. So we do npm install pg Postgres. So after installing that, we can actually run the npx studio, right? DrizzleKit studio, and now we can see that it will show us all our different tables. So let me just pull this up. Sorry, let me just pull this up here. Okay. So now we can see that we have this nodes object nodes table. So we are able to inspect all our different tables. And right now we can see this nodes is ID, name, created at, image URL, user ID. And this all maps correctly to the schema that we have defined here. So now we have ensured that the database is set up and we have pushed our schema up to the Neon database. So that's perfect, yeah, doing well. Okay, so the next step after setting up the database is I'm going to basically create this this node to basically allow you to add a new node. So the UI to add a new node. So I'm going to show you how to make this this new notebook. So when you click on it, there's a dialog, a pop-up that allows you to enter the name, and you can press create to actually do the backend call. So for now, let's just go back to our dashboard page, and then let's actually put the dashboard, the add component here. Okay, so let me just see how to actually start. All right, so here just below the div, right, for the, you see this conditionally rendered, you have no nodes, just below here, this is where we display all the nodes. Okay, so here I'm gonna create a new div, They have a class name of, so it's gonna be a display grid, so it's gonna have a grid layout. So let's do grid. Then when it's small screen, above we'll do grid calls dash 3. Then when it's medium, we'll do grid dash calls dash 5. Then when it's just on a small screen, like on the mobile screen, we'll just do grid calls of 1. And lastly, we have a gap of 3. And then within here is where we display all the nodes. But before all the nodes, right, we actually can add a create a node dialog. So this is actually what is shown here. Like this, you see this bordered new notebook button here where you can click to add this, to have this pop up. So let's create that component. So come down to your folder, under components, let us do create. Sorry, not under UI, make sure it's under components. Okay, so let's do create node dialog.tsx to tsrefce. Okay, so for the create node dialog, let's actually make it into a client component. Use client, all right, and then let us do, let's see. Okay, so to actually make the dialog, we'll be using the Shadcn dialog. So to do that, let's do npx Shadcn install. Sorry, npx Shadcn -ui at latest add dialog. So this dialog is like the pop-up thing when you click on the button. Okay, so while it's installing the dialog, let's actually do the styling. So we won't be returning the div, but we're returning a dialog. So we import the dialog from ./UI/dialog, and then within this we'll have a dialog trigger. So this dialog trigger is what triggers the pop-up, right? So let us have a div here. Sorry, div. Let's have class name of border dashed, a border 2, border green, 600, height of full, rounded of large. Okay, and then we'll have items center, justify center, and on the small screen we'll have make it flex, a column, right? Then when it's hover, we'll give you a shadow of XL, and then transition. Then on hover, we'll have a negative translates y of 1, and then flex row and padding of 4. So it's a very long class name. But let's just do the styling. Then I'll show you how it looks like and explain it more to you. Within the div here, let's have a h2 that says new notebook. Let's give you a styling class name of font semi-bold, text green 600. There's 600, and when it's small, we'll give you a margin top of 2, and then above here let's have a plus icon, right, with the class name of width 6, height 6, text green of 600, and give it a stroke width of 3. So if you save it, and then let's actually import it. So come back to your dashboard page. So let me close it all out. Dashboard, let's actually import this create node dialog, import, and let's save it. And then now we can see there's this thing that's showing up here. So I think there's a mistake in my styling, right? So here, items -center, justify -center, okay, flex call, right? And the reason why is because did I forget to add a flex? So let me just add a flex here. Okay, yep, so you need to add a flex. So it's just border -2, and just basically give you the border and just align the two elements within inside. So when it's small screen, you can see that is when it's big screen, it's stacked on top. When it's a small screen, it's stacked like horizontally. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so then when we click on this, right, there's supposed to be the pop-up, right? So this is the dialog trigger, is what triggers the pop-up. So let's actually make the pop-up. So we have the dialog content. So this dialog content comes from the ./UI dialog, and then inside the dialog content, I have a dialog header, right? This dialog header should have, let's put in, you can create a new node by clicking the button below. So if we save that and we click on it, right now we can see that there's this dialog that's popping up right now. So it looks very nice. Okay, so let's actually continue. So underneath the dialog header, so within the dialog header, this should actually be wrapped in the dialog title. Okay, here, so the create new node should be inside the dialog title, and then within it, below the dialog title, we have a dialog description. Okay, this dialog description will have, we can put like, you can create a new node. So this should be down here, and the dialog title should have a new notebook. So let me show you how it looks like so that it makes more sense. Yeah, so here, new notebook is the title, and then the description is the create notebook by clicking the button below. Okay, so that's good. And then underneath the dialog header, right? So this is where we put our input fields. Like here, we can see that this is input field. Sorry. We can see this input field. So you can see there's this input field for the name and the buttons to create or cancel. Okay. So underneath the dialog header, we'll have a normal form element. Okay. Inside the form element, let us just put a spacer with a height of 4. And then for this form, let's give you some class names of, sorry, not the form doesn't need any. So below, above the spacer, right, below the form, right, we'll have an input field. So this input comes from Shadcn again. So let's do npx Shadcn at UI, latest add input. So this is the input field styled by Shadcn. So let's wait for that to install. And then we can import it, input from the /UI/input. And let us actually give it a placeholder of name, ... So if we save it right now, we can see there's a form that has a name field here. Okay, that's nice. Then, underneath the spacer, right, let's actually put the two buttons, right? So have a flex.itemCenter. So this is where we can put the two buttons. So the first button, right, sorry, this first button will come from this first button will say cancel. And then the second button will say submit, create here. And for the first button here, we have a type of reset and a variant of secondary. Okay, and then yeah, and then for the create button, right, we'll just have a, let's just just save it first. So right now we can see there's create and cancel here. Let's give this button down here styling of BG green 600. Alright, so it looks more on brand. And for this items center, so just between, let's give it a gap of 2 so that it's spaced out a little more. Okay, that's perfect. So basically what we want to happen is whenever we let's add a type of submit. So whenever we submit, we want to actually create a backend, right? So let's actually create the state to actually hold the input element here. So we have already made this a use client, so then now we can do create a new state called input and set input to be a react.useState. Okay, so then we can bind it into the input field. So let's have a value of input, and on change, let us do e. We'll do sets input e.target.value. So we make it a control component so that right now we can just enter, and then it will be bounded to this input variable here, input state that we can access. Alright, so I think that's it for now for the front end. So now I'm going to try to show you how to create the backend to actually create a new node whenever we click on this create button. Alright, so let's actually create the backend endpoint to actually generate the images and basically the thumbnail for the image when we submit this name to the new notebook. So I'm going to clear out all my tabs, and then actually come down to app, create a new folder called API, and then create a new folder within it. Again, let's call it, let's see what we want to call it. So let's just create notebook, right? And then within it, we can create a root.ts. So this root.ts is a special file, so this root.ts, it will look at the folder structure and it will map to a REST endpoint. So we can basically, this file will map to /API/create notebook, right? So this is the endpoint that this file represents. So then we can export a async function called post, right? And then this post will have a request, a standard web API request object where we can actually get the request body. Alright, so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the const body. So the request body is going to be await request.json. Alright, so this will convert the request into JSON, and we can access the request body from there. Okay, so then we'll get out a name from the body, name equals to body. Right, so later on we'll be passing this new notebook's name into this endpoint here, so we'll get back the name. So before that, let me actually check whether the user is authenticated, because if the user is not authenticated, we don't want them to be creating a new notebook. So let's just get back the const equals to auth. So this auth comes from @clerk/NextJS. It's a server-side function that will return us with the user ID here. Okay, then we'll check. If not user ID, right, that means they're not authenticated, so we'll just return a new next response, right? Sorry, new next response that says unauthorized, passing in a status of 401. Okay. So now let's actually create the image, the DALL image, right? So before that, let's actually create a new library. So come down to your source/lib. Within the lib, let's create a new file called openai.ts. So this is gonna hold two functions mainly. So the first function is gonna be a async. It's gonna be basically get image, generate image prompt. Okay. So and the second function is gonna be obviously export async. This second endpoint is going to be for the actual image generation by the DALL API. Generate image. Okay, so let me just comment this out first. Sorry, this will be async function, and this will be also an async function. Okay, so for this generate image prompt, it's gonna take in the name, the prompt, which is a string. It's gonna basically take a name, like let's say we put in a name like a math, right? So we want a new math notebook. What it's gonna do, this function is gonna be responsible for using the OpenAI API to generate a very descriptive text for the math notebook. So it will generate like, a thumbnail that has a bunch of colorful numbers and circles, things like that. Basically, it gives a very nice, very detailed description, and basically take this description, this prompt, this description, and will then feed it into this generate image. Because for the DALL API, the more specific and the more detailed your description, the better the image result is gonna get back. So therefore, we need this image prompt function to actually generate a very detailed description from a simple name. Alright. So to do that, let's actually configure the OpenAI. So come down to your terminal and let's install the OpenAI package. So OpenAI-H. So this OpenAI-H is a special version of OpenAI that allows you to run on the Vercel H endpoint, Vercel H runtime, to make it faster, and it allows your function to run for longer. Okay, so yeah, so then let's actually close down the terminal and let's initialize the OpenAI API. So we need a few things. Import two things from OpenAI-H. So we need the first thing is configuration, and the second thing is the OpenAI API. Okay. So for the first thing we'll do is configure it to be new configuration, and we'll pass in the OpenAI API key. So how do we get the OpenAI API key? So come down to your browser and just search for OpenAI API key. Okay, come down to the first link here, and then just come down to menu, and then your API. So first you need to obviously register for the OpenAI account. Yeah. So come down to, I think, overview, and let's actually get started for developers, and sign up if you have not already, or sign in if you have an account. Okay, so after you have signed in to the dashboard, I want you to come down to your personal, like this, that menu dashboard, and then come to view API keys. And then here you can then create a new secret key, and you can name it aviation-YouTube. So create the secret key, right? Then it will create a secret API key for you and copy the key. So after you've copied the key, you can just close it out. We don't need this anymore. So come back here, come down to your .env, and let us call OpenAI _API key, and let us just paste it in. So there's a secret key. So let's save it, and then now come here and pass in the API key to be process.env.openai-api-key. So make sure this matches whatever you have here, spell it correctly. So this one, spell it correctly. Okay. So then after this, we can actually initialize the const OpenAI equals to new OpenAI API, passing in the configuration object. So now this OpenAI, we can call different functions on it, like let's say create, check completion, or we can create image here. So this create image is what is going to be used for the DALL image generation. Okay, so then come down here for the generate image prompt. So we'll take in the name. Right, so rename it to name. So this name is the notebook name, right? So let's actually create the description. So put in the try catch block, and then basically what we're gonna do is we'll do const response equals to await OpenAI dot create chat completion. We'll pass in the model to be a GPT-3.5-turbo, and then for the messages we'll have an array. So the first message will be a system message. We'll basically prompt the AI to tell it what it's meaning to do, what it's supposed to do, right? So we'll tell it that you are a creative and helpful AI assistant capable of generating interesting thumbnail descriptions for my notes. Okay, then we'll tell it that your output will be fed into the DALL API to generate a thumbnail. Okay, then we'll just tell it I want the description should be minimalistic and flat styled. So you can just basically prompt the different, like, and prompt the AI to give whatever you want. So we're just telling it that it's able to output a description of a interesting thumbnail. And then for the second message, here is where we actually pass in the prompt. So we'll have a row of user, and then for the content, we can just say that please generate a thumbnail description for my notebook titled, and we'll feed in the name. So this name comes from this parameter, which comes from this front-end UI that will pass back to the backend later. Okay, then once we got this response, we can just do, let us do const data equals to await response.json. So convert the response to JSON. Then we'll do const image description equals to data.choices, .choices index 0, .message, .content. Alright? Then lastly, we can just return the image description as a string. So to tell TypeScript that this function returns a string. And if there are any errors, let's just do console.log error and we'll just return the error. So let's save that. Okay, so actually instead of return, let's actually just throw the error. Okay, that's cool. So that's good. So now we got the image description. So let's actually try this out. So I'm going to come back to my root.ts and we can actually test out the image description function that we've just written. So let's do const image description equals to await generate image prompt, passing in the name from the body. And for now, let's do console.log image description. Okay, and then we'll just return a new next response that says okay. Okay, so I'm going to console.log it and we're going to try to link it up to the front end right now. Okay, so for the front end to actually hit the backend endpoint, we'll be using a library called React Query. So it's just a library to manage client and server state and actually mutations to the server. That means like hitting the endpoints or like querying something from the backend API. So to install that, we'll just do npm install at 10stack, right, /react-query. Right, so this React Query will help us just manage the state within our application, right, to hit the endpoints to actually mutate and get back the results. So to actually use that, let's come down to our directory, come down to our components, and let's actually create a new component called provider.tsx. So let's just do tsrafc. This is going to be a client component. Alright, so we have this client providers component. It's going to wrap our entire application. So we're going to import a few things. So we'll import from at 10stack /react query. So we'll import two things: the query client and also the query client provider. So the first step here is in the props we'll receive the children. That means it's the application that we are wrapping around. It'll be a React node. So let's destructure the children from the props. And let's actually just wrap the query client provider. We'll wrap the query client provider here. And then we'll just put the children here. Children. Okay. So this query client provider requires one thing. It requires this client. So how do we get this client? We get it by just doing const query client equals to new query client, like this. And we just have to pass in the query client here. Query client. Okay, yep. that's pretty much it. Let me just spell this correctly. Query client. Oops. Query. Okay, come on. Okay, so let me just copy this here. Alright. So basically, we just wrap the entire application in this children. So the reason why we need this provider is because let's imagine, right, you have one page that is fetching a list of nodes. So you fetch all the nodes from this one page and you display it on the front end here. But let's say you navigate to another page and you are fetching the same endpoint, you're hitting the same endpoint and getting back the same nodes, right? Instead of basically doing the same request twice and hitting the endpoint twice, React query will notice that, hey, I actually just fetched this query about like 5 seconds ago, right? I can just save the request by just reusing the same result from the first query. So basically, it will just store this result in a cache, and then it will just use this cache instead of hitting the endpoint again. So that's why we need this query client provider, such that every component within our React tree is able to have access to this cache. So I hope you understand this concept in React query. Okay, and then we can just come down to our layout.tsx that wraps our entire file, and we can just let's wrap our body, right, with the provider from our components, wrap this body, and let's save it. Then now we can use the React query. So let's actually hit the endpoint, right? So come down to our create nodes dialog here. So basically, let us have a const handle submit here. So this handle submit is going to have a type of it's gonna have the type of E. This E will be a react.form event, right? It's gonna be HTML form event. So it's gonna give us a type annotation for what this event is. So the first thing here we're gonna do is we'll just do e.prevent default. So we don't want to submit the actual form, right? So then we're gonna come down here to this form component here and just do on submit. So we'll just pass in the handle submit function here. Okay, that's pretty cool. And then let's actually continue coding it out. So what we want to actually hit the endpoint to actually create this. Remember this create notebook endpoint? So let's create a mutation for that. So const create notebook equals to use mutation. So this mutation, a mutation is basically like a function that hits an endpoint. Okay, so this mutation will take in a mutation function, which is going to be async function. And we need one more package to actually hit the endpoint. We'll just npm install Axios. So Axios is just a HTTP client to actually help us hit the endpoint at the backend. So we'll just do const response equals to await Axios.post. Axios. So when you import Axios, let's import Axios from Axios. So Axios.post. So we'll be hitting the endpoint, right? So it'll be /API/create. /API/create notebook. So make sure that this matches whatever you have here, right? Create notebook, right? So it's mapping to the file, this create notebook file folder, I mean. Okay, and then we'll just return response.data. Okay. So remember, we also need this remember when we hit this endpoint, we are expecting a name in the body, request body. So we have to pass in this name into the request body. So this name will just be the input field. So this input is basically what we pass in, we write in this text box here. So now we've got this create notebook function, this mutation, we can actually call it. So before we call it, let's actually check if input equals to empty string. Let's just do window.alert, say please enter a name for your notebook, and then we'll just return. Okay, so if the input is not null, then let's actually do create note.mutate. So create note book function has a mutate function on it, where we can just pass in the variables. So in this case, we don't have any variables and you pass in here, so pass in undefined. But then the second variable is an object that will give us some callbacks. So on success, so if it succeeds, we're gonna just do console.log. Yay, notes created. Then if it fails on error, we'll just do console.error. So we'll just log out the error. So let's save it first. And let's actually try it out right now. So what I'm gonna do here is basically when I enter something like a cat, and I press create, it's gonna call this handle submit function. It's gonna be then gonna call this mutate function. This mutate is whatever is here, this mutation function. So it's gonna hit this endpoint, create notebook. It's gonna pass in the input as the name. It's gonna return response.data. And remember, if you remember just now, we are just trying to console.log the image description to make sure the OpenAI is working. So let me just open up the terminal here so that we can see the image description being logged out if everything works correctly. So I'm gonna just press create, and then we can see that it's compiling the create notebook root. And then if everything works perfectly, okay, perfect. See, now we can see that this image description, so this is the response from OpenAI, it will say that, oh, minimalistic and flat style thumbnail description, playful feline with curious eyes, right? Yeah. So we can see this description is what this image description, we can feed this description into the DALL-E API, right? So let's continue creating the backend. All right, so come back to your OpenAI file. Right, so now that we have this, let's actually make the generate image. So this image will have obviously the prompt, right? So this prompt comes from this the function up here, this image description. So we have image description, which is a string, and let us actually call the OpenAI function. So we'll do a try catch block. So we'll do const response equals to await OpenAI dot create image, passing in the prompt, is the prompt being the image description. We'll pass in n equals to 1. So how many images do you want to generate? We want to generate one image only. I will tell you the size of the image you want to generate is 256 by 256 pixels. Yeah, 256 by 256. So yeah, like this. And then lastly, we can just do const data equals to await response.json. So we're going to convert this response into a JSON format. Then we can access the image. We can get const image URL equals to data.data at index 0, right, dot URL. And then lastly, we can just return image URL as a string. Then if there's any error, let's just console.error the error. So let's save it. And by right, this function will give us back an image URL pertaining to the image description generated by OpenAI itself. So come back to your root.ts. So after we have generated the image description, alright, so let's actually now generate the image. So we're gonna first check if not image description, right? That means something went wrong. So I'm gonna just return a new next response saying that failed to generate image description, pass in a status of 500. All right. Then if there's an image description, let's actually generate the image. So we do const image URL equals to await generates image here. So we get it from the OpenAI. We'll pass in the image description. So now this image URL will hopefully return us with the image URL that's generated. Then we'll check if not image URL, that means something went wrong. So I'm going to copy this here. And we'll just say that failed to generate image. Let's save it. Alright. Then lastly, let's actually create the new nodes, okay? So const node equals to await db. So we're going to try to insert a new node within the table, create a new row. So this db, remember we imported from @lib/db. So this is the, if you come back to your libdb file, this DrizzleORM, this db is what we are accessing. So you can call await db.insert into the $nodes, which is from the schema dot values. So we want to insert the name. So if you press Control space, you're able to see the different attributes that we need to pass in to create the row. So the name will obviously be the name that comes from this request body. So we can just shorthand it. And then for the user ID, right, we get it from this user ID up here. And then lastly, we need the image URL, which is from this image URL from this OpenAI here. Okay, perfect. And then we want to return the new inserted node ID, right? So like, what's the newly created ID? So we can do returning. What do we want to return? We want to return the inserted ID to be $nodes.id. And then finally, we can access it by doing, here we can just do nodes IDs, right? And then we can just return a next response. Return a next response .json, passing in the want to return the node ID that has been created, right? So we'll just do nodes IDs at index 0 dot insert id. So because this insert statement is going to return us with an array of with a list of all the inserted statements, but because we only inserted one, so we're going to access the first one, and we'll access its inserted id, which comes from this returning statement here. So then finally this node id will give us back to the newly inserted row id. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So let's save it and let's actually try it out. So come back to your create node dialog. So we can see that it's on success, right? If we succeed, right, we know that it's going to return us with this object, with this attribute called node id. So let's actually destructure this node id, and then we can just console.log a node id. So I can say that created new node. Okay, so let's actually try it out. So I'm going to open up the console here and save it. So we're going to hit the endpoint, right? It's going to hit the endpoint. Then it's going to call the image URL. It's going to generate the image. And then it's going to create a new row in the database and return us with the node ID, which will then console.log out here if it succeeds. So let's actually try that. So press create. So right now it's hitting the endpoint, although you can't see it. So you can see that it's trying to hit the endpoint. So let's wait for 8 to 10 seconds and hopefully it will create a new row and console.log out the newly created ID. Alright, so perfect, it works. So here in the console you can see that it says created new node with this object of node ID. So let's actually inspect this node, okay? So come down here. So let's come down to the new the Drizzle Studio. We do npx drizzle kit studio. Let's inspect the node that we have created here. Okay, here. So you can see that there's a new node with the ID of 1. The name is cat, created now, and have a new image URL. So this new image URL is the OpenAI DALL image. So let me copy this and let me just inspect it on the URL. So we can see, okay, so there is a cute, very nice minimalistic cat image that's been generated for our notebook. So now that we know that it works, so that's really good. Okay, so let's close this down and now we can move on. So let me just close this Drizzle Studio and exit it out. Alright, perfect. So if it successfully generated it, we're gonna then redirect them to a new page. We're gonna directly redirect them to like the to this page for the node ID for them to actually edit their new notebook. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna redirect them to this page. So here on success, let's actually redirect them. So we'll just get the router. So const router equals to use router. So this use router comes from not next router, but from import from next navigation. Here is use router. Okay, so invoke this and we get the router object. So if it succeeds, right, we can just do router.push /node book /node ID like this. Okay, perfect. Yeah, then that's pretty much it. Yes. Okay, so then if there's an error, let me just do window.alert failed to create a new notebook. Okay, so let me actually try it out. So one more thing to add is when we come down to this button, when it's loading, when it's creating, we actually want to disable the button, right, for a nicer user experience. So for this button, we'll just do disable. So we disable it when the create notebook is loading. So this create notebook has an attribute called isLoading to tell whenever the request is still loading. And then we'll have a loader. So if create notebook.isLoading, right? So if it's loading, let's display a loader. So we'll have loader2 from lucid-react. We'll give you a class name of width of 4, height of 4, margin right of 2, and animate spin. So let's save it. So let's actually create a new notebook now. So click on here and let us create a doc notebook. So when we press create, you can see this is loading to indicate that it's actually doing the API call. And then if everything works, it's going to get back the node ID and it will redirect us to it's gonna redirect us to this /notebook/node ID that we got back from the new created row. So let's wait for a while, and then if everything goes well, and yeah, that's perfect. So now we can see that it redirects us to /notebook/2. So this is the ID. Yeah. Okay, so that is excellent. That's excellent. We have created a new notebook, we can create a new row, and we have generated the image for the thumbnail. Okay, so now that we've redirected to this notebook page, let's actually start working on the notebook page. Okay, so come down to your app directory. Let's create a new folder called notebook, right? Because this is trying to correspond to notebook, right? And then inside the notebook folder, let's create another folder called angle brackets notes ID, right? And then within this folder, let's create a page.tsx. So this angle brackets is a wildcard. It's a wildcard to access this like ID variable here. So let's do tsrafce, right, to get the React component. Let's do notebook page. Alright, so we got the notebook page. How do we actually get the notes ID from the URL though? So NextJS actually provides us with the node ID in the props itself. So within the props, we can access the params object. Within the params to have a node ID, which is a string. So this node ID is gonna correspond to like whatever you have put in the angle brackets. Not angle brackets, square brackets. So then we can destructure the params, and we can destructure the node ID within the params. So for now, let's actually just display the node ID to make sure that everything is working. So in this case, yep, it's showing the 2 is showing, which represents the notebook/2 here. Okay, so now that we got the node ID, let's actually retrieve it, right? So I'm gonna make this into a server component so we can fetch it directly in the component. So this component is gonna run once in the server. It's gonna fetch the database for the ID and it's gonna return the HTML to the client. So let's actually check if the user's authenticated here first. So const user ID equals to awaits auth. So this auth comes from clerk/nextjs, and then now we can just do let's do const notes equals to await db, so the database from Drizzle dot select dot from the $notes where equals, right, we can just put it in the sense, right? So actually there'll be an end clause, right? So end, so there'll be 2 clauses. The first is the notes, the $notes.id has to equals to parse int notes id, and the $notes.user id should equals to the user id here. So this will be also, yeah. So let's see the reason why, because this user ID might not exist. So if not user ID, right? So if it's unauthenticated, let's just return return redirect from next/navigator to /dashboard. So let's save it. So basically what we did here is we get the user ID, right? If there's no user, that means they're not logged in, we're gonna kick them back to the dashboard, right? If they're in, we're gonna try to get all their nodes, right? So the node will be where the node ID equals to the params node ID, the URL param, and also the user ID of that node must match the user ID that's logged in, because we don't want other people to view your nodes, right? So we have this end clause, and then these nodes will have just checked. We're gonna check if not nodes.length equals to 1. So basically, if nodes.length not equals to 1, that means if there's no exactly one node, that means we didn't find the proper node. Then we're gonna just do return redirect to /dashboard. So if we have found a node, we are ensured that the node will live in nodes index 0. Alright, so now that we got this node, and I can actually display it by just putting it here. So let's just do like this. This on .stringify nodes now and 2. And now we can see that here it shows we're able to see the ID, the name, the creator at image. Okay, so that's good. So now let's actually build out the UI for this node page here. So instead of returning the JSON, let us actually just return a div. This div will have a class name of min height of screen, grainy, padding of 8. Yep. And then here we'll have another div with a class name of max width of 4XL and margin X of auto. Within this second div, we'll have a link here. This link comes from next/link. Here, let's actually just link it back to /dashboard. Alright. Yeah. So actually, I'm sorry. Above this link, wrapping this link, there's actually another div that wraps this link. So this div is gonna be wrapping like this back button, my name, and the delete button here. Okay. So obviously, because we want to put it in a row, let's actually give it a flex, right? So let's actually not do that first. Let's do border, shadow, XL, border dash tone dash 200, rounded large, padding of 4, flags and items, flags and items of center. So this is rounded here. So let me save that first, and now we can see that it shows up here. Okay, that's good. So then this link here, let's actually show the button to go back. So we'll have a button that says back. So let's give you a class name of BG Green 600 and a variant of small SM. Yeah, so this is size of small. Okay, so now we got this back button here. Alright, that is perfect, that's perfect. One more thing, let me see what is the issue here. Okay. Yeah, let me just refresh the page here. Okay. So beside this button, beside this link, alright, outside of the link, let us have the user's name, right? We want to display the name and basically which notebook they are on. So to get the name of the user, we need one more package, which is the npm install clerk/backend. So this clerk/backend will give us some backend utilities to get the user from the actual user ID. Okay. So let me just get the clerk user, right? So come down to your lib folder, and let's create a file just called clerk-server.ts. So this only runs on the server, right? So this clerk-server.ts will import from at clerk/backend, will import the actual clerk object, and we can just, it's just one line, export a new const clerk client equals to clerk, right? Passing in the API key, So for this API key, we'll pass in process.env.clerk API key. So if you come back to the .env file, we can see there's this clerk secret key. So copy this secret key and actually paste it here. So we are trying to access this secret key. So just save it, and now we got this clerk instance that we can use. So come back to the page.tsx here. We can actually get the const user equals to clerk. Const user equals to clerk. So this clerk comes from our clerk server .users .gets user, passing in the user ID. So then this will contain like all the stuff like this will await it, so we get back like the first name and the last name. Alright, so let us actually put it in the UI itself. Okay, so underneath here, this link, let's actually have a spacer that just put .w-3. So it's just a width of 3, just an empty div, and we'll have a span. This span will have a class name of font, semi-bold, and then inside this span we'll have user.first name and then user.last name. So if we save it here, we can see that my name shows up here, right? So it's my first name combined with my last name here. Okay, that's good. So then lastly, for this underneath here, let us have a span, and we'll have a class name of inline block with margin x of 1, and we'll just have a slash, and then after this span we'll have another span that have a class name of text-stone-500 font semi-bold, and here we'll put the notes.name. Okay, so now we can see there's a nice slash here followed by the name of the note. So this is this combination of these 3 spans here. Okay, alright, so then basically after this span we'll have a delete button here. Okay, so we'll do the delete button later on, but just know that the delete button will go here. So let me just put .ml auto, and we'll put a delete button to do here. So we can see that we put a margin left of auto so that this gets pushed all the way to the right side here. So we'll later implement this delete button. Okay, that's good. Then finally, underneath this div, so underneath we can collapse the border here, and then we'll just do underneath. So above the 2 closing div, we'll have another div of height 4. So it's an empty spacer div, a spacer div of height -4, and then underneath here is where we're gonna put our editor. So here is where our editor goes. So this editor is gonna be this thing that you see here that has all the functionalities built in. So that's the main part of the application. So for now, I'm gonna build a container around it, right? So I have a div here, and this div is gonna wrap this editor later on. Let's give you a class name of border stone of 200, shadow XL, border rounded large, padding X of 16, padding Y of 8, and then lastly width of full. So let's save it, And right now, here is where our editor will go. Yeah. So you're doing great. So now the next part is gonna be actually configuring the editor, and I'll show you how to actually build out this very customized editor from scratch. Okay, so now let's actually begin building the editor component, which is the main block of this project. So we'll be using a editor library called TipTap editor. So it basically gives you a lot of functionality for building a very customized and full-fledged editor application. So let me walk you through on how you do that. So come down to your app, and let's actually, under our components, let's create a new component, and let's just call it TipTap editor.tsx. So let's do tsrafce. Okay, so we need a few dependencies for this TipTap. So the first thing we need is npm install, at TipTap/react. Then we need TipTap/pm. So this is PM stands for prose mirror. So prose mirror is a primitive which TipTap is built on. So we need that for certain APIs and functionalities. And lastly, we need TipTap/starter kit. So this starter kit will give us a certain default configuration, for like text or like paragraph or headings, for us to start playing around with. So we need these three things. So we'll wait for the npm install to be finished. Alright, so my mistake here, it should be TipTap, not TipTab. So make sure you spell it right. So then we're gonna wait for the npm to install. Okay, so once it is installed, let's come to this editor. The first thing is let's actually make it into a client component, because we'll be using state. So I'm gonna just configure the editor. So what we're gonna do here is we'll need something called use editor. So let's import the use editor hook from the TipTap. So import from at TipTap/react, and we will need the use editor. Okay, so let's come down here and let's actually initialize the editor. So we'll take the const editor equals to use editor. We'll pass in several things. So the first thing is autofocus to be true. So whenever the page loads, we want it to automatically focus on the text box. So it's a good user experience. And then we'll have extensions. So these extensions are remember the starter kit we installed. So we need the starter kit. So let's import starter kit from at TipTap/starter kit here. Then we'll pass in the starter kit into the extensions array. And then lastly, we'll have a content. So this is what is actual content that's gonna be displayed in the editor. So we'll bind it to a state called editor state, and we'll do set editor state equals to it's gonna be a string. Okay, so then the content here is gonna just be the editor state. All right. So then lastly, on update, so whenever we change we make a change in the editor, right? We're gonna just call this function. It's gonna do set editor state to be editor.getHTML. So we can see there's a lot of APIs like getJSON and things like that, right? So you can read all of this in the documentation. I spent about a few hours reading through the documentation. So just distill it down to the most essential things. Then if you're interested in exploring further and expanding on this editor, then of course you can read the documentation. But anyways, this editor basically allows us to use this method to get back the HTML, which will then bind it to the state, this internal local state. Okay, then lastly for the UI, let's actually return a div. This div is gonna have another div called just for the editor content. So this editor content we can import from TipTap/react, and we just have to pass in the editor to be the editor instance that we have instantiated here. So let's save it, and let's actually import the TipTap editor here. So let's just do TipTap editor, and let's see if it works. So I'm gonna just refresh the page, and let's see if everything works. Okay, and it's good, it's working. So now we got this editor, and we can it's a multi-line thing. Yeah, so we can see that TipTap actually comes with it's quite basic for now, right? But I'm gonna teach you how to customize it. So I guess the first step here is actually to remove this outline border, because it looks very, very annoying. It doesn't look nice. So if you inspect in here, we can see that there's this class name that's wrapping everything called the TipTap prose mirror class. So we're gonna target the class in our CSS file and remove the outline for now. So come down to your globals.css, scroll all the way down here, and we're gonna add a custom styling to the TipTap.prose mirror class. So we're just gonna remove the outline. That's all that you do. And if you come back here, right now we can see that there's no longer a outline here, and it looks much cleaner in this case. All right. So that's good, that's good. So let's actually continue defining it. So let's see what I want to add here. So let me now teach you how to add this like editor bar. So like you see if you scroll up here like this and you press bold, if you press bold, you can actually bold it. Yeah. So I'm not sure why you can't bold it in this case. Bold. Yeah, you can see that if I press Command B, it bolds it, or I can Command U to like underline it and stuff like that. So I'm gonna teach you how to make this editor work. Alright. So come down to here, let's actually create a new menu bar. So this menu bar will be a separate component that's gonna live on top of the editor. So come down to your components and actually create a tap menu bar .tsx. We'll do tsrafce. Okay, so for this menu bar, we will need to accept the editor. So remember this editor that we have defined in the TipTap editor here. So this editor will need to pass into this menu bar later on. So let's actually just import the menu bar into the editor first. So I'm gonna come up here and just for this outer div, let's give you a class name of flex. Yes, a flex, and then underneath here, let us just do a sorry. Actually, this should be a React fragment. I'm sorry. Because I was thinking of something else. Let's move this React fragment down, and then move this div content down here. So I'm going to explain what this is. So this flex is going to contain you see this menu bar is one component, and this save button is another component. So we'll have the TipTap editor menu bar, as well as a button that says saved. Okay, so then it's gonna be it's gonna line up side by side. And then inside this editor content here, we'll add more content down here. So it's just a minor styling thing. So we're gonna pass in the editor, right? It's gonna pass in the editor from here. So we want to make sure this editor exists first. So we'll do if editor exists, then I'll put the menu bar here. So let's actually configure the props to get it in. So let me just put the TipTap here. So in the props, we'll expect the editor to be a editor from TipTap/React. Then now we can destructure it from here. Okay, so now the menu bar is showing up here, and we can continue on. Okay, perfect. So for the menu bar, I'm going to just do let's see, I'm gonna return a div, right? This div is gonna have a class name of flex-wrap and gap of 2. So this div is just gonna basically contain all of these buttons. So all of these buttons are differently styled, like it's like custom buttons. Like each button is like an individual button. So then we're gonna just wrap it into all this flex container. So let me just demonstrate let me demonstrate something about the the TipTap menu bar. So we have just a normal button here. So this is not from Shadcn because we want to style it a certain way first. So for this button, let's have a bold. So we import this bold icon from Lucy-React. Let's give it a class name of width of 6 and height of 6. So let's save it. And right now we can see that this is bold icon here, so and it's a button. Okay. So for this button, we'll pass in a few things. So on click, right? So let me explain how this works. So we're gonna do editor.chain. So this chain is basically saying that the editor, we can chain a lot of commands on it. So the first thing here we want to do is we want to focus back on the editor. So after we focus on the editor, we want to toggle bold. So we can toggle whatever selection we have it on right now. So imagine I have this selected here, and I press this bold button. It's gonna focus on the editor and then toggle bold on the selection here. Okay. So after toggling the bold, we can actually run the command here. So I just basically found this API from their documentation. I'm just briefly explaining it here to you. So just need to know about how it works like this. And then for here, we want to disable this button, right? We will disable it when the not editor .can .chain .focus .toggle bold .run. Sorry, here run. Okay, so what it does is we want to disable it if the editor cannot toggle bold. So in some cases, like it's not able to toggle it bold, then we just want to disable this button here. So you can see that there's this command, this can function here. Okay, and then we'll have a class name of, we're gonna check. Okay, so if we're gonna check for a condition. So if editor dot is active, So if it's already bold, right, we want to show an active class, right? So we're going to show a is active, right? Otherwise, we're going to show an empty class name. Okay, so right now we can actually see in action already. So if you come down to this thing, right now it's invisible, so I can type a few things. And as I highlight this, right, highlight this button, I press on this button and we can see that it's bold out, right? So what it does is it just chain the thing, it focuses on the editor and it toggles the bold. So right now we have like this bold functionality working already. So all we need now to do is we have to fill in the rest of these functionalities for like the italicism and the headings and stuff like that. So let me just run through it really quickly. I'll run through the first few, then I'm going to copy in the rest so that we can have a better understanding. Okay, so underneath this button, let's actually do the next part. So we have another button. So you know, actually I can just copy this button down here and right, instead of toggle it bold, this time to toggle italic, and then here will be toggle italic here, and then here will be, instead of checking for bold, we want to check for italic here, italic. Alright, then for this, instead of this bold icon, I'm gonna just put it as italic icon from Lucid-React. So if we save it right now, we can see that there's now an italic thing. So if we highlight this and we can italicize it, yeah. So the rest of the concept is gonna be very, very similar. So what I'm gonna do is, instead of wasting your time and just doing the same thing over and over again, I'm gonna just copy in this, copy in the code here from my code up here, and let me just clean up a few things and I'm going to explain what I've just did. So, TipTap MenuBar. Okay, so basically it was the same thing, right? I'm receiving the editor, right? Then I'm basically returning the buttons, the different buttons like the bold buttons and things like that, right? Except that I just went through the documentation and I found everything that is available to us. So we have this italicized button, we got this strike through button for the toggle strike, toggle code, so we can like toggle it whether we want to make it a code block or not. Okay, then we have heading, so all the heading level 1 to 5 to 6, so we can have like different headings. But right now, let me show you why it's not working. Because even though I toggle the headings, right, we can see the text, but the text size stays the same. Even though it's H3, right? Let me show you. If I toggle it H1, H2, H3, right, the thing is being toggled, it's being changed, but the text size is not changing. This is a Tailwind issue. So we actually need to install a Tailwind Pros utility. So this Tailwind typography allows us to give back the markdown in terms of like the H1. It will allow Tailwind to respect our H1, H2, H3 sizing. So to install this, let's actually install the typography extension, right? So come down to your terminal and just do npm install at Tailwind CSS /typography. And then underneath here, come back to your Tailwind config file, okay? And we need to add this typography into our plugin. So scroll all the way down here. For this plugin, we'll add one more thing called the require, which is the typography library that we just installed, this extension. So after we have this, we can come down to our TipTap editor, right? Remember this div that's wrapping it? Let's give you a class name of pros. So now this pros will allow us to like respect the H1 and H2s. So if we save the pros now and we wrap it now, we can see that now it respects the H1, H2, H3, H4, and H6. Yeah. So that is basically what the pros of Tailwind utility does for us. Yes. So coming back here, so it's just a different heading levels, things like that. Then we have obviously the bullet list for the, like, if you want to make a list out of something, you can do that here. You can have ordered lists, code blocks, block codes, and undo and redo basically. So this supports undo, like I can press Ctrl Z to undo. Yeah, so I hope you understand this. It's quite a simple API once you understand how to use it. Then all this list order is just basically icons that I found from Lucid-React. So yeah, there's nothing too complicated about it. Yeah. So one more thing here is, right now we can see that when we click on it, when we click on the button, right, even though it's active, we don't have a way of showing whether it's active. So come down to your globals.css file. Okay, we can do .isActive. Right, we give it a background color of, let's say, hashtag DA, and we'll have a border radius of 2 pixels. So if we save it right now, we should be able to see it in action. Right, we can see that when we bold it, right, there's a background to it, italicized. We can see there's a nice background to indicate which modes are basically active here. So this is H4, H3, H5. Yeah, so that's pretty much very simple styling. So these are all read from the documentation, so you don't have to worry about it too much. If you're interested, you can always read more into it. Yeah, so I'm just here to like save you some time and show you the basics of how to actually get started with this powerful editor library. Okay, so now that we have the editor up and working, so now let's actually work on doing the saving functionality, so the auto save. So every time you type, right, so we're gonna have a debounce. So after the debounce, we're gonna basically save it into a database. So if you're not sure what debounce is, I'm gonna show you in a while, so don't worry about it. So I guess the first step here is actually let's close off the menu bar and let's come up here and let's actually have a react.use effect, and let's actually just toggle it on every time the editor state changes. Okay, so let's just do console.log editor state. Okay, so let us actually see what the editor is gonna look like. So every time I click on it, we can see that the paragraph is formed, and if you have a heading, right, we can see there's a h1 and the paragraph, right? So let me just move myself out of the way so we can see how the editor looks like. So basically, we want to save this piece of information to our database, and then every time we load into our notes, this note page, we're gonna just so that we can load it in and display whatever we have in the database. Okay, so to do that, so let's actually do the debounce. So the thing is, the reason why we want to debounce it is basically, imagine we are typing in every time, right? So we can see that I'm typing in like, let's say, a few tens of okay. Let's say I'm typing in like maybe 20 or like 30 characters per second. Okay, 20 or 30 characters per second. Like let's say I'm typing fast, right? We do not want to basically hit the database endpoint and try to save the whole text every time we type a character. It's gonna be very wasteful of resources, right? It's also gonna be very like slow, right? Because you're hitting the database like imagine 20 times a second. That's not very optimal. So what debouncing is debounce is basically it will just wait for a while after you have finished typing. Then you wait for maybe like 500 milliseconds to make sure you have finished typing. Then it will trigger the save, right? So that's what debounce means. So to write the debounce function, let's actually come down to lib and let's write a use debounce hook.ts. Okay, so it's a custom hook for us to implement the debounce functionality. Okay, so I'm gonna just import React from React because we're gonna be using useState, and let's export a function called use debounce. Okay, so this debounce is gonna take in two things. It's gonna take in the value, which is gonna be a string, and the delay, which is a number. So this value is basically what is we're gonna pass in the editor state, and this delay is basically how many milliseconds do we want to wait after I finish typing to trigger the save. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do is gonna take const debounce value, and set debounce value is gonna be a state, right? Passing the initial value here. Okay, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have a react.use effect here, and I'm gonna just do const handler equals to set timeout. Okay, and basically what I'm gonna do is set debounce value to be the value every time the value changes. Okay, so I'm gonna set a timeout for, let's say, delay seconds. Okay, I'm gonna put the delay in here also, and then I'm gonna return a cleanup function to clear the timeout. So let me explain what I'm gonna doing first after I code it out. I'm gonna return the debounce value. Okay, so what's happening here is, okay, let's say this value, right, it changes every 20 characters per second, right? It changes 20 times per second. What it's gonna do is every time it changes, right, it's gonna call this use effect is gonna be called. Okay, so when it calls, it's gonna try to set the debounce value to the change value, right? But then it's gonna change it, it's gonna only set it after let's say 500 milliseconds, right? But if I change it again within 500 milliseconds, it's gonna call this function, a cleanup function, to clear the timeout. So it never actually gets set. So basically what happens is, only if I stop typing after 500 milliseconds, then does this debounce value, this function gets called, and then my debounce value will be set. So let me show you in action to show you, then it's gonna be much easier to understand. So here I'm gonna have a const debounce state, debounce editor state equals to use debounce. We're gonna pass in the editor state, and we'll pass in a delay of, let's say, 300 seconds. Would that be enough? Actually, let's just do 500 milliseconds. So now I'm gonna try to console.log out the debounce editor state every time it changes. Okay, So let's try it again, right? So now let's say I type. Look, as I type, you see nothing gets logged out. But watch if I stop typing, and after 500 milliseconds, see it gets logged out. So I can keep typing, and if I stop for 500 milliseconds, it gets called again. So that's what the debounce does. So we can basically like type, and then we can type, and only if you stop typing, then will the function be called, and then we can call the save function here. So here we can then save to db. Okay, so I hope you understand the debounce thing. So now let's actually write the function, the API endpoint, to actually do the saving. So come down to your folder, and let's under our API, let's create a new folder called save note. Within this folder, let's do a root.ts, and let's do export a async function called post, and the request will be a standard request object. Okay, here. Alright, and then here we can actually do the function to actually save the note. So the first thing here is, let me just wrap it in a try catch block, and we'll just destructure, we'll get the body out of await request.json. So get the request body. So within the request body, I will need two things, right? We will need let me see. We need the note ID and the editor state. So this editor state will be what is shown here, this debounce console.log. And then this node ID is basically we are trying to see which node are we actually trying to update. Okay, so we need these two pieces of information. So we're gonna just check if not editor state or not node ID. So if neither of these are, if one of these are not passed in, we want to return a new next response, right? Passing in missing editor state or node ID, passing in a state of 400. Okay, so if there's a node ID, we'll just set the node ID equals to parse in node ID. So let's actually change this to a let so that we can reassign it here. Okay, awesome. So now let's actually get the nodes, right? So const nodes, we're gonna try to find the node with that node ID. So we'll do await db dot select dot from $nodes from the schema. Sorry, here dot from nodes $sign from the schema, right? Where the nodes.id equals to the node ID passed in from the request body. So if nodes.length not equals to 1, so if that means there's not exactly one node, that means something went wrong. So let's just return a new next response saying that failed to update, passing the status of 500. Okay. So now that we got the node, let's actually get the node equals to nodes index 0. So it's the first nodes out of this array. Okay, then now let's actually check. Okay, so let's just do if nodes.editor state not equals to editor state. So this is the old state, right? This is whatever is in the database, and this is the new state. So we can check if it's different, because if it's the same, then it doesn't make sense updating it. We're just wasting resources. So only if it's different, then let's actually set it, right? So let's just do await db.update update nodes. We want to set the editor state to be the new editor state that we got up here, right? Where the node ID equals to the node ID passed in from the body. Yeah. So I hope you understand. We're just updating the editor state based on the node ID. And then if everything goes well, let's return a next response JSON saying that success equals to true and a status of 200. If there's any errors, let's actually console.error the error, and let's return a new next response.json, right? Asking the success to be false and a status of this is response. Let's pass in a status of 500. Internal server error. Okay, so now we got this endpoint. Let's actually try using it on the front end. So remember here, we want to save to DB every time the debounce editor state changes, right? So let's actually do that. So first, let's actually get the mutation function. So const save note equals to use mutation from 10 stack query, passing the mutation function to be an async function to hit the endpoint. So we want to hit this save note endpoint here. So let's just do const response equals to await axios.post /API/save node. So this is what endpoint we have just written here. Then we need to pass in two things, right? We need to pass in the node's ID, which is the nodes. So how do we actually get access to this node? We can actually get it from the nodes. We can get it from the nodes, which is a nodes type. So remember this node type, we got it from our schema here, right? So we can actually get this nodes type here and can destructure the nodes. And let's actually pass in the node ID to be node.id. And then of course we want to have the editor state to be whatever we have this editor state here. So this node ID and this editor state will be passed back into this function, node ID and editor state, and then we do the corresponding update. So we actually need to pass in these nodes, right? If not, we don't have access to this node. So come down to your nodes ID page. For this TipTap editor, TypeScript is yelling at us because we need the nodes. We need to pass in this nodes object that we've got fetched from the database. So now we have this, we got access to the node, we can have access to the node ID and stuff like that. Then let's just return response.data. Okay, pretty cool. So now we got this function to actually update the database. So let me just do if we're gonna just check if the bounce editor state equals to an empty string. Let's just return, because it doesn't make sense if you want to like update an empty string. So if not, let's actually just save node dot mutate. So we're gonna call the mutate function, which will in turn call this which will in turn hit this endpoint. Okay, so we'll do mutate passing in undefined. So because we're not passing in anything to this to this function here, right? And then on the second argument here, we can just do on success. So if there's a success, let's actually console.log success update, and let's pass in the data. Then on error, so if there's an error, let's console.error, and let's just do, yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so then let's actually have a saving state also. So right now we can see there's this save button. So we can see that in a deploy app, when it's save is a save, disabled save, and then as we like type around, we can see that it changes to a saving state. So we can actually do that here by creating a new local state. So let's have another state called const is saving, and we do set is saving. Actually, we don't need a local state. We can just use this save node function. So underneath this button here, right? So this button here we can actually put here. So we do save nodes dot is loading. So if it's saving, right, I'm gonna do saving. If not, I'm gonna just put saved. And let's actually disable this button and give you a variant of outline. So right now it will be saved, and then basically when I hit endpoint, so let's actually try it out. Okay, so I'm gonna open the console. I'm gonna start typing. So it's gonna hit the endpoint, right? Then you can see that it flashed for a second and says successfully updated. That means our database has been updated and we return with a success of true. So that's good. So now we can see that as we type and stuff, it will hit the endpoint and it will save it. I can bold it. If I bold it, it will also trigger the save. So let me just remove this console.log because it's getting kind of annoying. So let me just remove this. And yeah, everything is working perfectly. So we're able to save it. So let me just, right now if I refresh the page, right, we can see that if I refresh the page, right now nothing appears, right? So we need to load in the save editor state on initial render. So what we can do here is come down here to this. Remember here we have this editor state. Instead of setting to empty string, we're gonna set it to the node.editor state. Yeah. And then yeah. So if there's no editor state, we're gonna just set it to empty string. Yeah. So in the case that editor state is null, right, we'll set it to empty string. If not, we can see that it's showing up here. So I can like type like hello world, right? So we can see that it's saved. And if I refresh the page, right, it's saved to the database. Okay, that's perfect. So we have learned how to use a debounce hook to debounce our change. And then once the debounce has been triggered, I've taught you how to actually hit the endpoint to save the editor state within the database. So you're doing amazing. Then the next time we're going to teach you how to integrate the AI into the chat completion. Alright, so just one thing I want to change is if there's no editor state, that means like it's a new fresh notebook, right? So instead of putting an empty string, I'm going to put a h1 that basically has the notes name in it, so that it's like a better user experience. So I'm just going to encapsulate the notes.name and just put in a h1 tag. Alright, so that's a very simple UI fix. Alright, so let's actually now start working on the AI completion part. So in here in the original app, you can see that when I press on, let's say when I press Shift A, right? When I press Shift A, it activates the AI and then it will just help me auto-complete all this stuff, right? And to do that, we actually need to bind a custom keybind, like a custom keyboard shortcut, so that when we press Shift A, it's able to detect that we want to start auto-completing. So to actually do the custom keyboard, we actually need to create a new custom text. So right now you can see there's this in the use editor, we got these extensions on this starter kit, right? So we're gonna add another custom extension, and this custom extension will contain the keyboard shortcut. So to get that, we need to import one thing from up here, which is import from let me see, where is it from? Okay, at TipTap slash text extension slash text. Alright, and we need to import the the text, so it's just default import. So we can pass this text into the extensions here, right? But we want to customize it a little. So let's actually do this. We're gonna do a custom text. Okay, custom text equals to text.extend. So we're gonna extend this text. I want to pass in the add keyboard shortcuts. Okay, this add keyboard shortcut will be a function, and what it returns is it will return a keyboard shortcut and then a function that will be called whenever the keyboard shortcut is triggered. So in this case, we want to be called whenever we have a Shift A. So when we press Shift A, we're gonna call this function, and what I'm gonna do is just return true for now. I'm gonna say console.log activate AI. Okay, and then I'll pass in this custom text into the extensions list, custom text, and let's save it. So now let's see if it works. So I'm gonna come open up this editor and the console. So by right, if I press Shift A, right, if I press Shift A, we can see that let's see if it works. Okay, Shift dash A, let's see if it works. Press Shift A. Okay, it works now. So you see, activate AI is being called. So when we press Shift A, we can see that the activate AI function is being called. So that's good. So now here we know that within this function is where we can call the autocomplete, right? So for the AI part, we're gonna be using a Vercel AI SDK. So it's a pretty new package from Vercel, right? That gives us a very nice library to interact with backend LLMs and also give us that very nice streaming effect. So you see when we press like Shift A right here, there's like the text will slowly come in one by one. So we have to do that using the streaming effect. So Vercel AI SDK gives us that opportunity. So let's actually set up the backend first for the completion. So come down to your /API, come down to your app folder, come down to your API folder, let's create a folder called completion. With this completion, let's do root.ts. So this root.ts will map to a /API/completion. So this file here will map to this URL. So let's export a async function called post, which will get in the request with a request object. So let's actually install the AI SDK from Vercel. So it's just npm install AI. So it's just 2 characters AI. This will give us a lot of power in the completion. So I'm gonna close this down and we're gonna import a few things from Vercel. So the first thing is let's import the import from OpenAI Edge. So it's the same configuration we did just now. So we need the OpenAI API as well as the configuration object. And now we want to import a few things. Import from AI. So this AI is what we just installed. So let's actually initialize the OpenAI first. So let's do const config equals to new configuration, passing in the API key to be process.env the OpenAI API key, which is what we have from the env file here. Okay, and then let's actually initialize the const OpenAI equals to new OpenAI API, passing in the configuration object. So now we can actually play around with this OpenAI object. So the first thing here is actually let's extract the prompt from the body. So to that we'll do const prompt equals to await request.json. So later on what we're gonna do is when we press Shift A here, we're gonna take the latest like maybe 30 characters and we're gonna pass into this prompt here, prompt variable here. So now we can actually request for the response, right? So we'll do const response equals to OpenAI dot create chat completion. We'll say the model will be GPT-3.5-turbo. For the messages, right, so we're gonna have the first message being the system message to prompt the system what its role is supposed to be. So we'll tell it that, hey, you are a helpful AI. Actually, I'm just gonna copy in and just gonna just tell you what it is because it's quite a long prompt. Okay, so here, let me just copy here. Can I just copy this content? Alright, so let's see here. Okay, so I basically tell it that you're an helpful AI embedded in a Notion text editor app that's used to autocomplete sentences. So the traits of AI include expert knowledge, helpfulness, cleverness, and articulateness. Is a well-behaved and well-mannered individual, and is always friendly, kind, and inspiring, and is eager to provide vivid and thoughtful responses. So we're just basically prompting the AI on what we expect for the responses to be like. So after that, we can create another message, and this time will be the user to the user, right? So the content of the user will be let me just copy this in. So I'll leave all of this in a paste bin down below, so you can just copy it from there. So you have to like type it out manually. So for the user, will be saying, I'm writing a piece of text in the Notion text editor app. Help me complete my train of thought here, and we'll pass in the prompt. So this prompt comes from this request body, and then we want to keep the tone of the text consistent with the rest of the text and keep the response short and sweet. So this is some prompt engineering to make sure that whatever output is good. And lastly, we want to pass in the stream, passing the stream to true. So this stream will then basically allow the OpenAI API to pass in like tokens like one by one instead of like waiting for the entire response to finish before passing us back. So better user experience. And lastly, we want to do const stream equals to OpenAI stream. So this OpenAI stream comes from this AI library, right? And we'll pass in the response. Okay, and then we'll do return a new streaming text response from AI. So this streaming text response function, passing in the stream. Okay, so this will basically return us with a streaming content type that we can ingest in the front end to basically mimic the streaming response when we press Shift A. Alright, so that's good. We have finished the backend endpoint. It's pretty simple, just hitting some prompt engineering. So let's close this down. So come back to our TipTap editor. Okay, we're gonna use a new hook from. We're gonna import this hook. So let me show you what hook it is. From AI/React. So under the React library from AI has a use completion hook. So this use completion hook will allow us to interact with the backend API that we have just written and is able to return us with the streaming tokens as we like manually trigger the AI completion. So the first thing here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just take const equals to use completion. I'll pass in the API to be /API/completion. Completion. Okay, so this API is the root to whatever backend here, and it has to return a streaming text response. So this is mapped to the root that we just done for this completion here. Okay, because it maps to /API/completion, so it has to match here. So we're telling you what API root it is. And we can destructure a few things. We can destructure the complete and the completion. So this complete is a function that we call to trigger the completion, to basically trigger the endpoint. And this completion is it's just like a React state to get back all the tokens. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is underneath here, because here we know that we want to activate the AI, right? I'm gonna do complete, so I'm gonna call the complete function. I'll pass in the prompt. So this prompt is basically let's get the last 30 characters. So let's do take the last 30 words. So we'll just do const prompt equals to this dot editor dot get text. So this will get all the plain text dot split dot slice dot split on the empty space, white space, and slice it by 30, -30, and we'll just join it back with a empty space. So let me just console.log out the prompt so we can be able to see what is happening here. So whenever we press Shift A, we should get the latest 30 words, right? So let me just show you. So let me type in a bunch of stuff. If I press Shift A, we can see that it gets back this list of 30 words, right? Okay, so now we want to feed these 30 words into the completion endpoint. So that's called complete on the prompt itself. Okay, and what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna use a effect to basically console log out the completion. So remember here it also returns us with this completion variable. So I'm gonna show you what it looks like, console.log completion. I'm going to save it. So for now, I'm going to delete everything else, and let's just type something serious, like let's say, I like cats. Okay, I'm going to press Shift A. It's going to trigger the thing, and watch what happens soon, right? Yeah, so you can see this completion is coming back. Do you see this? Yeah, so you can see that cats with their charming and things like that. So this is the completion variable. So the issue you can see is that every time this completion, it just like streams in token by token, right? So then into the world, then becomes into the world full stop. So how do we actually get that individual word? So because, right, we want to get the individual word, so that we can insert into the editor, right? The issue right now is because I have this function. Let me show you here. So I'm gonna do editor dot commands dot insert content. I can insert the completion, right? But I'm gonna show you the issue here. So let me just do editor. So if not editor, return. So let's actually move this down below the editor. So let me show you the issue right now. So basically every time the completion changes, I'm going to insert this new completion into whatever text editor I have here. So let me show you the issue right now. Okay, so I like cats. Okay, watch what happens. Press Shift A and look, it's gonna give us a bunch of gibberish. Look at this. This is not right. This is not right. Why? Because every time this completion changes, this completion is a whole nother paragraph. So if you keep like basically if you keep inserting content, it's gonna insert like all these junk paragraph because it's duplicated. The completion is duplicated. Right? We can see that here it's duplicated. It comes like token by token. So we actually want to get the individual token that comes back from the completion. And to do that, we can actually we can use a clever trick. We can just do const last completion equals to react.use ref, passing an empty string. Okay, so then what we can do is here we can have a const token equals to react.use memo. So this use memo is to memorize the function, to memorize the calculation, right? So every time the completion comes back in, we're gonna do we're gonna basically take the difference between the completion and the last completion. So let us actually get the memo. Let me just check. Okay, so if not completion, we're gonna return. But then if there's a completion, we're gonna just do const diff equals to completion dot slice. So we get the whole paragraph, and then we just want to like take the difference between the whole paragraph and the last completion, so that we can get the individual token that was actually returned from the backend. So we'll slice by the last completion dot current dot length. Okay, and then we can just return the diff. So this will return us with the individual tokens, and I can prove it by, instead of this completion, let me just delete this and put in token, and let me just put in this token, and actually console.log token. So if it's not editor or not token, will return. Okay, so let me prove to you why this will work right now. So let me just save it here again. So if I delete the whole thing again, I like cat, and this time if I press Shift A, we can see the tokens start coming back in. See, it's in addition, right? Yeah. So right now it's still not working, and the reason why is because, let me show you. If not completion, right? Because after we have set the diff, we will still need to set the last completion dot current to be completion. So after we have already take the difference, we want to set the last completion so that it finishes the loop, and then we can get the latest token again. So let me try again. So I like cats. Okay, so let me open up the console here. Okay, so I was debugging something, but I'm actually not really sure why it doesn't work or why it works. But anyways, we were talking about how we're trying to get back the individual tokens from the completion string, right? So what we did was we did a React use effect. So whenever the completion came back, we basically keep track of a last completion, which is a ref, right? So this ref will not change, will not re-render the whole component wherever it changes. So it's very good to like just keep track of what the last completion was. So every time this completion changes, we're gonna basically take the last completion and we're gonna take the difference between the last completion and the completion. So then we're gonna get back the individual token. So this div represents the individual token. And then we can just set the last completion to be the current completion, and we just take the editor and we insert the div, the token into the editor. So right now it works right now. So I can just do like cats and dogs are, right? So if I zoom in, I can press Shift A and it should just give me back a nice streaming effect where it just automatically adds it into the text editor and it saves it automatically. Yeah, so we refresh it and it saves. Yeah, so that's how the completion works. Yes. So I hope you understand that part. So it's just about manipulating and using the use completion hook from Vercel AI and then trying to get the difference to get the actual individual token to then insert the individual tokens into the editor. Yep. Okay, so we have completed pretty much the bulk of the application. We get to like edit it with bold and like things like that. And we also did like the autocomplete by pressing Shift A. So let me just, the last step here is just to help me add like the UI change for this like a tip press Shift A for the autocomplete. So let's add that part in here. Okay, so come down to this inside the under the editor content here, right? So remember we got this pros, right? For this pros, actually let's add one more class name for it. Let us add this pros-sm with full and margin top of 4. Then underneath this div, let's have a height of 4. So it's a spacer div, empty div. And here we can add the keyboard command. So we'll give it a span of text sm. And then let's give it a tip press. So let's give it a KBD. So it's a special keyboard element in HTML. Shift plus A. And let's give it a styling. So class name of padding x of 2, padding y of 1.5, text super small XS, font of semi bold, text gray of 900, text gray of 800, BG gray of 100, border dash gray of 200, and rounded dash large. And then underneath here, Shift A, let's do for AI autocomplete. So if we save that, right now here we got this. So let me add one more spacing, some spacing in front of it here. So like this. And then here we can also add a spacing like this. Okay, so now it looks good. So we got a command to like tell people what to do to actually do the AI autocomplete. So that's perfect, Okay, so now that we have finished it, let's actually go back to build our dashboard page. So right now the dashboard has only this new notebook. So now let's actually fetch all the notebooks and display in a grid layout here. So I'm just gonna come down and let me just close out all my tabs so we are more organized. So come down here, close my tabs, and let's come back to our dashboard page. Okay, so let's display all the notes, but first let's actually get all the notes. Okay, so for the dashboard page, what we need to do is since let's make it into a server component, and then let's actually fetch it. Okay, so let's do const user ID equals to auth, right? So make sure that the user is logged in. Then we'll do const notes equals to await db.select from $notes where equals notes.user ID equals to user ID. So add an exclamation mark so that we ensure that the user will always be here. So now we get back a list of all the nodes that belongs to this user that is logged in. So now let's actually look through it, right? So below here inside this grid layout, so remember here this conditionally render. So let's actually do the thing. So if no nodes display this, so let's do nodes.length equals to 0. So basically if there's no nodes, then it makes sense to display this text showing that we have no nodes. Okay, so if you have nodes, let's come down here. So underneath the create node dialog, so let's do nodes.map. So for each node, let us return a normal A tag, so a normal anchor tag. So we have href equals to /notes notes.id. Okay, so let's give you a key of notes.id. Alright, within the anchor tag, let's actually add a div. So this div will be the card, so we have a overflow of hidden, flags of column. When we hover over it, let's have a shadow of XL, transition. When we hover over it again, we negative translate y of 1. So within the card here, let us show an image. So let me show an image first. Let me give you a width of 400 and a height of 200, and we'll give you out of notes.name, and finally a source node.name, and the source crowd will be notes.image URL. Alright, so sometimes it might be null, so let us do an empty string if it doesn't exist. Okay, then underneath here, let's actually save it first. So now we are able to see. Okay, we got the cat and the dog. Right. Let me show you why the image is not showing up first. So let's come down below, inside the div below the image. Let's have another div. They have a class name of padding of 4, and then have a h3. So this h3 will have a class name of text XL, font semi bold, text gray of 900. Then within the h3, let us put notes.name. Underneath the h3, let's have a spacer of h1, height of 1. So it's an empty div. And we'll finally have a paragraph tag that have a class name of text sm, text gray of 500. Within the paragraph tag, let us show new date, notes.created at, right, dot to locale date string. Wait, let's save it, and right now it should show up nicely. Okay, the date does not exist, so it's a capital D. So let's save it, and okay, showing. So now we got this date here and stuff. So the reason why it's not, there's one more thing I'm missing. Let me see what I'm missing. Okay, overflow, things like that. Okay, so one more thing for this div on this overflow hidden, let's just add rounded large, so that it's a little more rounded. Okay, so it shows up nicely here. And if you go back to like refer back to our thing, let's hope that it looks similar. Okay, perfect. So there's actually another border around it, so let's actually add a border. So we'll do border stone of 200. Okay, so it looks nicer now. Perfect. Yeah. Okay, so the issue right now is, why is the image is not showing up is, let's actually go inspect into our Drizzle kit. I'm going to show you what is the issue. So we'll just do npx drizzle kit studio to open up your database client in the website. Alright, so open this up. Okay, look at this image URL. I'm going to copy this image URL. I'm going to paste it in the URL. Right now it's going to tell us that it has expired. So the reason is because OpenAI DALL-E 2 expiry, right? So by default, DALL-E 2 gives you about, I think, 2 hours, after an hour. So the URL that's generated, like this URL, is only valid for an hour. So after an hour, this URL will no longer be valid. So it's actually up to us, the developers, to save this temporary URL to another permanent storage. And in this case, this permanent storage, I'll be using Firebase. So to actually store this, let's actually go to Firebase console. So search for the Firebase console, and you have to log in or register for an account. So Firebase is like a backend as a service to give you that give you a lot of functionalities like authentication and storage. So once you log into the dashboard, come down to add a project. So create a new project, and for the project, let's call it ideation-YouTube. Then press continue, and we don't want to enable Google Analytics, just press create project, and it's gonna wait for it to create a project. Okay, so now that the project is ready, let's press continue. Okay, so we'll be brought to the ideation YouTube plan, to the dashboard. And in this case, we want to activate the storage, right? So come down to the sidebar, and you should be able to find, let's see if I'm able to activate it. If I zoom out a little, okay, come come down to the sidebar, and I want to search for the storage. So storage here. So retrieve user generated content. So here is where we can store our images, the JPEGs. So let's press get started in the storage and start in test mode so that we're able to access it. So then press on next, and then lastly it's saying that this is where our default Google Cloud storage bucket is set. So let's choose a location that's near us. So in this case I will choose Asia Southeast 1. So choose somewhere that's closer to you. Okay, and then after done, let me actually then just come and press done on the bottom right corner. My head is blocking, but yeah. So we are creating a bucket, meaning that we are choosing a location nearest to us to store all our DALL-E images. So we're gonna wait for you to create the default bucket, and then now I'm gonna teach you how to actually set up the Firebase to connect to the storage. Okay, so when the bucket has finished initializing, we have to create a new web project. So create a new website that is able to consume these images. So come down to the project and just press web, right? So we're gonna create a new web app. So you can name it whatever you want. I'm gonna just name it my web app. And we don't want to we'll just disable Firebase hosting, and now press register app. And it should be able to give us all our API keys to connect from our web application onto this Firebase. Okay, so let's follow it. So we need to install this Firebase package, so it's okay. So let's come down to our terminal, and let's just stop the Drizzle Studio and do npm install Firebase. Alright, so once we have installed Firebase, let's see what is next. What happened to our thing? One app, my web app. Okay, so after we have installed Firebase, right, we need to copy this code into our Firebase .ts. So come down here and close the terminal, come down to our lib. So under our library, we're going to create a new file called firebase.ts, and we'll basically just copy in whatever code is here. So press copy and just copy it here. So you have to blank out your API key here, okay? Blank out your API key. So what you're going to do is going to copy whatever you have here, cut it out, and go into your env and let us do actually, let me see. Yes, we have to do Firebase API key and just paste it in here. Okay, then with this, you can then come back here and just do process.env.firebase API key. Because we do not want to upload this into our, we don't want to upload this into our Git repository for everyone to see. Alright, so after you have this, you can then close the Firebase tab. Alright, so the next step for the Firebase is we want to initialize the storage, right? So underneath here, we'll do export const storage equals to get storage. So this get storage will come from Firebase/storage. So import get storage from Firebase/storage. So get storage and pass in the app instance here. So this storage is what we will be using to interact and upload all our files onto a Firebase storage basically. So let's save that. Okay, so let us now talk about the flow. So right now, if you come back to your create notebook root here, right? We can see that we're returning this node ID, and then after we have created it, so we create node dialog, right? Remember that after we have created this new node, we are directly navigating to this notebook. So before we navigate it, right, we actually want to hit another endpoint to upload the temporary DALL-E URL to permanent Firebase URL. Okay, so let's set up the endpoint to upload the image, the temporary DALL-E image to the permanent Firebase storage. So come down to your app directory, come down to your API folder, and then let's do upload to Firebase. Let's create a root.ts within this Firebase. Okay, and now let's actually work on this. Okay, so let me see if I can find it. Alright, so let me just export a async function called post, which will take in the request object. And let's actually do the try catch. So we're gonna accept a node ID from the request.json. Await request.json. Async function, export async function, await request.json. So we'll be expecting a node ID from this. So what we're gonna do is, after we have created a new node here, right? We're gonna basically hit the endpoint, passing in the node ID. Then from this node ID, we'll then extract out the DALL image URL, then save it to Firebase. Okay, so hope you understand that part. So let's get the image URL. So we'll just do const node equals to await db dot select dot from $nodes where equals so we want to equals to the parse in the $nodes dot id and the parse in nodes id. Okay, so this will be nodes. So then we're gonna check if not nodes, nodes index 0 dot image URL. So if the DALL-E 2 image URL doesn't exist, that means something went wrong. So let's return a new next response saying that no image URL, passing in a status of 400. Okay, now we will try to upload the file to Firebase. So let's actually create a new underneath come down to your firebase.ts, right? Write a function below here to actually upload the file. Okay, so we're gonna write a function, export async function, right, which will be called upload file to Firebase. So it's gonna take in the image URL, which is a string, and a prompt, which is also a string. So this prompt is just to name the file, just to give the file a name. So let me just name it as name here. Okay, so the first step is actually, let's do a try catch block. So we'll try to get the response equals await fetch. So this is the native fetch URL, fetch API, and we'll fetch the image URL. So this image URL, remember, this is the DALL-E 2 API, the DALL-E 2 temporary image URL. Okay, so we'll await it, and then we'll get the buffer equals to await response dot array buffer. So this will convert the image into an array buffer, and now we can just do const file name equals to name dot replace. We want to replace all space characters with just an empty string, and we'll just add dates dot now plus dot jpeg. So we're just renaming the file to add a custom ID and then make sure it's a JPEG format. Now we can do const storage ref. So we want to get the reference in the Firebase storage equals to ref. So this ref is from the Firebase /storage. We pass in the storage object from this get storage here, right? And then we pass in the file name. Okay. So then after we got the storage ref, so now we got a reference to that actual file. We can then upload the image to that file. So we do await upload bytes. So this upload bytes is also from Firebase /storage. We pass in which reference we want to upload to. We pass in the buffer. Okay, so this buffer contains the actual image, right? And then we want to finally tell it that the content type is a image/JPEG, because we're trying to upload a JPEG image up to the storage. Okay, and then finally at the end we can just do const Firebase URL equals to await gets download URL from Firebase storage, passing in the storage ref. So these are all just I read the documentation and figure it out myself, right? So I'm just distilling it down for you in this simple code snippet, telling you how to get the image URL and uploading it to Firebase. In the end, we just want to return the Firebase URL. So this is the permanent URL now. And then if there's any error, let's just console.log, console.error out the error. Okay, so now we've got this function. Let's actually call it. So come down to your come down to your upload to Firebase root again, and this time we're gonna then call let me see. So after we got the image URL, let us do const Firebase URL equals to await upload file to Firebase, passing in the nodes.image URL. Okay, and then we pass in the name here. Okay, so does this make sense? So because this upload file to Firebase, remember it takes the image URL and the name. So you're just passing in the DALL-E URL and the name of it. So it's gonna basically take the DALL-E URL, it's gonna put it into Firebase storage, and return us with this Firebase URL. So then finally we want to save this Firebase URL to the permanent database. Okay, so let us do await db.update $nodes dot set image URL to be the Firebase URL, and then where equals nodes.id equals to parse in node ID. So we're just updating the image URL to the permanent Firebase URL when the node ID equals to the passed in node ID from the body. And then lastly, we can just return a new next response of true and a status of 200. Then if there's any error, and if there's any error, we just return a error and a internal server error code. Okay, perfect. So now we got this endpoint. Let's actually call it. So come back to your create node dialog, right? Now we got this create notebook mutation. Let's create another mutation for the uploading of the Firebase. So we do let us actually get the Firebase root. So let me just do this const upload to Firebase. This is gonna be use mutation. The mutation function this time will be async, right? Const response equals to await axios dot post /API / upload to Firebase. Wait, right? And passing in the nodes ID. Wait, so let me just delete this. Okay, so this API / upload to Firebase, this is the root that we created just now, right? This upload to Firebase root, right? So remember, it needs two things, right? It needs one thing. It needs the node ID. So the node ID will be how do we actually get the node ID? We can get it from the props itself, right? So let's get the node. So to get the node ID, we can get it from the parameter. So we can just pass in the node ID. Okay, and then we can just return response.data. So let me just walk you through what we're doing first. I'll write out the code, then I'll explain. So after we have created a new node, let's actually also do upload to Firebase.mutate passing in the node ID. So after we have created the node, right, we got the node ID, the newly created node ID. Then we're gonna call this upload to Firebase mutate, passing in this node ID. This node ID will then be propagated up here to this node ID, this mutation function, and then we're gonna be hitting this upload to Firebase API with this node ID, and then we're gonna just take the temporary DALL API and then convert it into the Firebase URL, and then we can just return response.data and just save it. So then it's gonna basically convert our DALL image into the Firebase storage. So let's actually try it out. So I'm gonna refresh the page and let's see if it actually works. Okay, so I'm going to just create a new notebook, and this time I'm gonna call it, let's say, TypeScript, and let's create. So let's look into the console for any errors. So it's gonna basically start creating the notebook. So the first create notebook root is gonna handle the creation of the images, the DALL image, and then here we can see that there's an error, right? It says that this encoding library is not found. So we actually need to install this encoding library for it to work. So just do npm install encoding. Okay, and lastly, let's go back here and let's see if it still won't work for now. Of course, we need to try again. Actually, it works. So we can see that this URL is now uploaded to the Firebase storage. So if you come down to the Drizzle Studio, right? So let's do npx drizzle kit studio, right? So if we refresh this, we can now see the TypeScript has a Firebase URL. So this Firebase storage, this Firebase URL is permanent, whereas this is temporarily. Okay, so everything works fine, everything is perfect, everything is working good. So the last thing here is instead of using this instead of using the default image, we're going to use the next slash image. So import this next slash image component, so it will help us optimize our image further. If you save it right now, it's going to throw an error, right? Because, let me show you why. It's going to say that this hostname is not configured. So we actually need to add this Firebase storage hostname to our configuration. So let me just copy this this Firebase storage.google apis.com. Let's copy this, and let me just come down to my next config.js. So inside this config, I need to basically allow and whitelist this image domain. So we do images, right? Passing in the domains to be an array, and it's gonna basically allow any images from the Firebase storage. So let's save it, and let's actually delete the previous two records. So I'm gonna choose these two records and delete it. Delete. And now I'm gonna refresh the I'm gonna refresh the server. So do npm. So right now it's stopped, right? So let's do refresh. Sorry, let us see if we are able to get it up and running again. And now it works. Okay, so now we're using the we're using the next/image component, and let's actually try it again. So let's create a new notebook, and this time let's call it something creative, like let's say computer graphics. Let's see what kind of graphics it's able to generate. So it will hit the API, it will generate the DALL-E 2 image, and then it will redirect us to the note page, right? And then you will then, in the meantime, in the background, you will upload that DALL-E API into our Firebase storage. So we can see that configure graphics is written here. I can press Shift A and it's able to generate the autocomplete for us. So that's beautiful. Everything is working perfectly. Okay, then it's automatically save it to the database. And then when we press back, then we can refresh the page and it's able to see the computer graphics. And this image is then uploaded into Firebase. So yeah, I think that's it for everything. Actually, one more thing is, so right now if you press here, it brings you to /notes, which is incorrect. So it should bring you to /notebook instead. So let me come down here to this. So instead of leading to /notes, it should be /notebook. So let's save it and let's try again. So if I press this, then it correctly brings me to the TypeScript page. Alright, that's perfect. That's perfect. And last but not least, let's actually do the delete button. Okay, it's a pretty simple component. So come down to your components. Let us do components, create a delete button.tsx. So TSRAFCE. Okay, so for the delete button, you will try to accept the note ID, right, which is a number. So let us destructure the node ID. So this is to tell our database which node to delete. So then we're gonna do let us actually render the button. So return a button that have a variance of destructive, so it's red color, and then we'll here have a trash icon. So this trash is from Lucid React, and then basically let us give it a size of small, and then on click. So when we click on it, let us actually confirm to the user first. So const confirm equals to window.confirm. Are you sure you want to delete these nodes? Question mark. So if not confirmed, we want to return. So they're trying to delete the operation. But if they confirm it, that means we actually want to call the API function. So let us create a new endpoint in API. Let's create a folder called delete node, and let's create a root.ts. So it's the same thing. Let us do export async function post, taking in the request to be request. And now let's actually get the const nodes ID equals to await request.json. So we get the node ID from the request body, and then we can do await db dot delete delete from, so delete nodes where equals $nodes.id equals to parse int nodes ID. Okay, so then we're gonna just return new next response of okay, and passing a status of 200. Okay, so yeah, it's just a simple function to take in the node ID and just return it. So let me just save it and come back to the button, and we can then take the mutation. So let's actually convert this into a client component first, and we can just take the mutation function. So const delete nodes equals to use mutation, passing in the mutate function to be async. We are gonna hit the endpoint, right? So we do const response equals to await axios dot post slash API slash API slash delete node, right? So this is the root that we created just now, right? Passing in the nodes ID, right, which we receive from props, and then we just want to return response.data. Okay, so then if confirm, we're gonna do delete nodes.mutate, we could pass in undefined because it's not accepting any parameters. And then on success, we're just gonna we're gonna basically route them back to the dashboard. So let's get the router. So we just do const router equals to use router from, make sure it's from next/navigation, not next/router. Okay, and then we're gonna do router.push dashboard. Yeah, then if there are any errors on error, we're just gonna console.error the error. So let's save it, and then let's actually import this delete button. So come down to your nodes ID, to your node page. So remember where we put our, where do we put our delete button here? Okay, so let's just import the delete button. So do delete button, right? And you pass in the nodes ID, which will be nodes.id. So now let's save it, and now we have a delete button showing up here. So if you press delete, you ask us for the confirmation. Then let's actually add one more thing. So we want to disable the button when the delete nodes dot is loading. So while it's loading, we want to disable the button. So let's try again. So it's gonna ask me to confirm. When I press OK, it's gonna try to delete, and it will just come back, and we can see the node has been deleted. So yeah, everything works perfectly, and yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, everything looks exactly the same, and I'm pretty happy with what we have completed so far. So I think, if I'm not wrong, that's everything you need to know about the application. Alright, so I'm very happy that you did this with me. It's a very quick and simple build this time, not very long, but it showcased a lot of the power of artificial intelligence and the OpenAI API. So the last step here is I'm going to teach you how to deploy it to Vercel, right? It's going to be very simple. So the first step here is come down to github.com/new. We're going to basically push this repository to a new GitHub repo. Alright, so what I can do is I'm going to expand the screen, both the screen here. So the repository name, you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to just put ideation-YouTube. And you can put it as public or private, up to you, and just press create repository. So after you have created a repository, you have to follow the commands here. So come back to your VS Code, come back to your terminal. I'm going to stop everything running. Okay, stop everything running. Here. Yes. And then I'm going to do git status to make sure that everything here is added. So let's do git add all, then git commit -am initial commit. So we commit all our changes. Now we can do git branch -m, so to rename our branch to main if you have not done so already. And then we can add the origin, right? So we're basically linking our local repo to the remote repo. And lastly, we can just run git push -u origin main to then push our code up to the GitHub repo. So now if we refresh the page, we can see that all our changes is up here. So that's perfect. Okay, so now let's actually deploy it. So I think there's two more things I want to do. So come down to your create notebook root, right? So to make this into run on the Edge runtime, right? Remember the benefits of Edge runtime? It allows your function to run longer and faster. So you have to export a runtime, export const runtime equals to Edge. So if you export this runtime variable, NextJS Vercel will detect it automatically, and you will deploy this function on the Edge runtime instead of the normal Node.js runtime. Okay, and one more thing is come down to your nextconfig.js and just add the TypeScript flag, right, to ignore the build errors, and for the ESLint to ignore during builds to be true. So yeah, this is just for the Vercel deployment. Then after that, you can just commit it again. So I'm gonna use the graphic user interface. So I'm just gonna move Edge function. So just commit it and push it out. So this is the last two things, I think. Yeah. So if you come back up here, we can refresh and we're able to see our changes. Hopefully, let's refresh one more time. And yeah, so we can see that our commits being done now. Edge commit, Edge function. So to deploy to Vercel is really simple. Come down to vercel.com and come back to the dashboard and add a new project. So add new project and choose your repo that you have just linked up. So just press import and you can just name it whatever you want here. And then choose the build setting. So for the environmental variables. So come down to your env here. So a neat trick for you is press Command A or Control A if you're on Windows to select everything. And then copy it. Come back to Vercel and you can just paste it in here. And it's able to copy and detect all your environmental variables in here. with that, you can just press deploy, and then everything should be well, and in a few minutes, it should be building and just deploy on that easily. So I'll see you when it's finished building. Okay, so wait, one more thing I want to do is come back to your dashboard here, come back into your application, come down to your settings, and for the functions, right, I want you to choose one that is nearest to you. In this case, I live in Singapore, so I'm going to choose Singapore and save it. Alright, so this is just to make sure that the function, the APIs, will be very near you, so that the user experience will be very fast. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. So come back to your deployments, and we're just waiting for it to build. Yeah, so I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so it has been deployed successfully. So now let us just visit the domain that it has given us. So let's actually try it out and see and hope that it works. So you can see that AI note taking assistant or typewriter is working. So let's press get started, and it should promise to log in. So just log in with your account, and hopefully it will bring us to the dashboard where we're able to see all our notes that we have done. Okay, and then we can see the images will show up soon, right? Let's try creating a new notebook. Let's call it cats. Let's create, and hopefully the age runtime will work and does not time out on me. Okay, so it works. It works. Okay, that's amazing. So we can see that it brings us to the new notebook, and we can type whatever we want here, like press Shift A, and we can see the AI auto completion still works perfectly. It's deployed up here, and yeah, we can see that it automatically saves it. Right, wait for it to save. I can italicize it and do everything like that. And yeah, I think that looks perfect. And if you come back to the home page and refresh, we can see that the DALL-E 2 API should have generated image for us. Yeah, and it's a cute little kitten, paws, things like that. Yeah, so I'm glad that you are here with this journey. So today we learned a lot. So let me just recap what we have learned. So we learned about NextJS 13, how to style it properly with Shadcn, how to use the OpenAI with the DALL-E generator, Vercel Age runtime. I taught you how to use DrizzleORM to interact with NeonDB, how to use Firebase storage to actually store your files, and also the TipTap editor to actually give you that power to create the Notion-like editor, and the Vercel AI SDK for all the streaming AI large language model needs. So I'm happy that you stayed with me. So if you enjoyed and learned something from the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. I put in a lot of effort for this kind of videos, and I hope you really learned something new. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and have a good day.